We'll begin shortly here. Just going to give a couple of our commissioners a little more time to take seat. Well, good afternoon or good evening, I should say, everyone. Today is a special meeting of your Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas Commissioners. Today is September 4th, 2024. Before I call the meeting to order, I want to announce that we have individuals attending remotely as well as on site. All participants joining by phone should please mute their phones at this time to avoid any background noise when not speaking. During the meeting, please make sure that you announce yourself by name and title every time you speak so the public that is participating knows exactly who is speaking. This is critical given the number of remote participants and is current guidance from our Kansas Attorney General's office. Also, when you speak, please make sure that you speak clearly and at an audible level where you can be heard and our clerk can capture your comments for record. I'll now call this meeting to order. Clerk, can you announce the meeting and give us our roll call?
Good evening. You're hereby notified that a special meeting of the Unified Government of Wyandotte County, Kansas City, Kansas is scheduled to be conducted in a hybrid format on Wednesday, September 4th, 2024 at 5 p.m. for a discussion regarding ARPA funds in the fifth floor conference room of the Municipal Office Building, 701 North 7th Street, Kansas City, Kansas. Roll call. Bynum? Here. Burrows?
Here.
Townsend?
Here.
Burns?
Here.
Ramirez, we have an absence memo. Hill?
Here.
Kane, we have an absence memo. Lopez?
Here.
Stites, we have an absence memo. Davis, we have an absence memo. Garner.
Here. This evening, thank you, Clerk. We're going to continue the discussion from our most recent commission meeting. regarding the status of residual ARPA funds and possible reallocations of those funds to various entities, Kansas City, Kansas. I'll recognize our county administrator, Mr. David Johnston, and he'll lead the conversation.
Thank you, Mayor and Commissioners. As the mayor noted, we do have ARPA funds left over that we need to reprogram. Otherwise, unspent ARPA money will go back to the federal government. And therefore, to continue this discussion, we'll start with a summary. It will be led by our CFO, Dr. Knieven. Shelley?
Shelley Knieven, Chief Financial Officer for the Unified Government. And I've got just a quick presentation that outlines a little bit more about the ARPA reallocation. As we had shared in a couple of meetings, we've given a couple of updates since I came on board. We originally got about $87.5 million in ARPA funds, and those were divided between the city of Kansas City, Kansas and Wyandotte County. It was about 55.3, almost 0.4 million to the city and about 32.1 that was awarded to Wyandotte County. The commission at that time, and that was back in 21, at that time, the commission allocated the funds in 8 categories. It was revenue replacement for 20 and 21, which basically just offset some salaries. And so that funding has already been committed and spent based on lost revenue related to the COVID pandemic. That happened back in 21. There was an immediate needs for housing category that was about 1.8 million. That funding was awarded to the United Way, and they immediately spent all of that money through awarding it to other agencies. So those funds were fully spent again back a couple of years ago, back in 21. The category of immediate needs in public health is one that I'll talk about in a little more depth here in a moment. As well as capital needs and grant match, which were other categories that funding was set aside. The subrecipients, we had set aside funding for a competitive process that a number of you, either as a commissioner or as a member of the public, participated in that process. It was a competitive application process. The funds were awarded to different agencies to undertake a number of initiatives related to COVID. Also, we awarded some funds to Bonner Springs and Edwardsville for specific infrastructure projects that are ARPA eligible. And then administration of the grants, and we've contracted with a company called iParametrics, which has assisted in this process, particularly with regard to the subrecipients and working with them and monitoring and making sure that they're spending the money in a timely manner. The key point tonight is that we have to have all of these funds encumbered under contract by December of 24, or we will have to return them to the federal government. We have to have a high level of confidence that whatever we encumber those funds for will be spent on that purpose, because we won't be able to reallocate again based on the current regulations. So that is a guiding principle that really led us to some of the recommendations that we brought forward. And as we consider new ideas that might be put on the table, just something to be thinking about, that the key is that it has to be under contract and there's rules that go with these dollars by December of 24. Then the funds have to be spent by December of 26, which is important because some of the capital projects are infrastructure projects that the commission had identified. And so as long as they're under contract, that's fine by December of 24, but they also have to be completed hopefully much sooner than December of 26, but no later than December of 26. So there's a time ticker.
And to add to that, that's why you didn't see any request for operation cost for our government, because that would be for the next fiscal year. And if you do anything with operations, it has to be spent by the end of this calendar year. It's not encumbered into the future. So there's two different types of timing issues that we have to pay attention to as we discuss how to allocate the funds that Dr. Knieven presents tonight.
Right. Thank you. And with operational costs, it's also being thoughtful to the fact that these are one-time costs or one-time dollars. They go away. So we don't want to solve a problem today that just creates a problem tomorrow. In terms of how that allocation was given to us from the federal government, that's the dollars as they came in for the county and the city funds. Initially, the county and city allocations was a big consideration, a big issue because of the regulations at the time. Tonight, when we talk about reallocations, most of the funds that are available are county funds. And the county funds can be used for city initiatives. It's basically a grant then that the county will work the back paper, but the grant that the county will make a grant to the city for project whatever. And so tonight, you don't need to get too hung up on, is it county money or is it city money? The great majority, all but a very small portion of this is county money, but there is a way to spend it within the ARPA regulations properly. So just to assure you of that. Originally, this was a big issue, but as we've gotten evolved regulations, because they kept issuing them, we're confident that we can do it this way, should it be the desire of the commission. Again, these were the categories, and this is the dollar amounts that went with each one of the categories. I will note that with revenue replacement, there were a couple of things that the commission at the time set aside some dollars for the Kansas and the Central Street Bridge. So of that $31 million up there under revenue replacement, you carved out a little bit for a capital project. And we have talked about that in May. That's still on the list, still proceeding, will be under contract and is a perfectly eligible project. And then grant match, which we're putting on the table as a possible place to reallocate some dollars from, should it again be the commission's desire. So this was the outline of how the dollars were spread out. Subrecipients, I know we've had discussions about the subrecipients. That was about $12 million. We had about $25 million in capital improvements and so forth. So that just gives you like, what was our initial plan, our starting point? So when you look at those categories and you look at what was allocated versus what is either spent or encumbered to date, there were a few areas that we started really focusing on. And this is what we had as a discussion back in May when I came before you on May 30th, that we had not utilized all of our grant match. Although we had been successful, we've got about 7 projects that were identified and we were able to leverage those dollars to get other grants. Our immediate needs for public health, which is not just the health department, there are a variety of initiatives that were funded in terms of what was allocated versus what was spent. And in large part, that was because the health department in particular did receive a FEMA grant. So a lot of what they originally intended to do with the ARPA funds, they ended up doing with the FEMA funds. So that freed up ARPA funds. It's not that the work didn't get done, but there is a new funding source. The subrecipients we had talked about before, and I had some concerns about where some of them were. I'm pleased to report that we feel very confident that all of our subrecipients will be able to complete what they were originally contracted for on time. Some of them had contracts that went beyond the December 24 completion. For example, KU had a program that was funded, and from the very beginning, it was envisioned to be a 2-year program. But they are under contract. And so all of those funds are safe, meaning that they're going to be used with the exception of one small area, which we'll talk about in detail, that's available for reallocation. So that just kind of gave us a focus area. Where have we not spent our money? Because again, our goal is however the commission desires to spend the money. Of course, we want to make sure it's spent in a way that's eligible. But most of all, we want to make sure that it's under contract and it will be spent within the time frame so that the community gets the benefit of these dollars and we don't have to return them. So this is the information that kind of outlines for you where the underspending, if you will, is in the different categories. So over on the left, the first one is the immediate needs for public health. We had between city and county, we had a total allocation of about 13.4 million. Again, we've spent about 7.3. That does not include the FEMA money. Like I had said, they got FEMA money. This is just the ARPA money. So the great majority of the funding that's available for reallocation is coming from that public health area. That was a decision of the commission to designate that category. It wasn't the federal government said you need to spend X number or X percent on public health. That was a decision just on how the commission arrived at its initial allocations. So those dollars, as long as they're eligible, can be used for a variety of purposes. For capital projects, we had about $28.5 million total allocation. We've only spent about 4.9 million, but the rest we are very confident we will have under contract. We have a couple of very large projects that are air conditioning projects for City Hall, for the courthouse, and for the jail. Those will all are in the process of being ready to be let out for a bid. And we're confident that we'll have those under contract in time so that we don't lose these dollars. So, but there were a couple of areas where we expect that we will have some capital project funding available for reallocation. Probably about 300,000 of that is from the initial cost estimates we had for 4 air conditioning projects that were approved by the commission previously. And after they got the final quotes on those, they came in less expensive. So that's freed up about 300,000. And then the other is the park department had allocated to them $150,000 for the pool. And as they've analyzed and looked at the pool, they understand that there's a lot more needed at the pool than 150,000. So they're looking at doing a broader comprehensive study of what is needed and what the cost will be. And they simply didn't want to waste dollars just to spend dollars. So they're suggesting that those dollars be reallocated, and in particular, it would be probably their request and administration's request that would go for a park project. We'll talk about some of that connection point here in a moment. For grant match, I mentioned that we have been successful in getting some grants, leveraging our local dollars for federal dollars. But that's been about 1.3 million so far to date. So again, we've got almost 2 million available for reallocation if we want to. And then the subrecipients, as I said, we're very confident that the different agencies will complete their work. I did not have that confidence in May. This really prompted a number of them as we had conversations with them to put into place an action plan to get their initiatives completed and their funds spent within the original contract amount. So, or timeline. There is one agency that's put money back on the table because just based on their cost estimates, things came in a little less than they had anticipated. And that is the Friends of Yates, which had received $390,000. And they believe that they will only need about 333,000. So they said that's available. The rest of the agencies feel confident that they will be able to spend their dollars in the way that was originally awarded to them. And we will continue to monitor that. And if that changes within the next couple of months, we'll be back before you because again, just because somebody says that they can do it, if they don't get it done, we either need to extend their contract before December of 24, or we need to rethink what we're doing with those dollars with your direction. Okay, but we do have now 9 of our agencies that have completed all of their work. So that's great success. We really have seen some movement. And when the time's appropriate and the commission desires, we could have iParametrics or some of the agencies come before you and give you a final report on what was the impact of those dollars, what was actually done with those dollars, and how many people benefited, so that we can show that there was really a huge impact on our community from these ARPA dollars. So this is the same information. I've tried to kind of summarize it in a couple different ways, but we had the dollars that are available for immediate needs. Most of it was that public health. And then next was the unused grant match. And that really constitutes the big bulk of the available dollars of 8.8 million. Okay, so as the commission discusses how to reallocate these ARPA dollars, there are restrictions. Okay, so for ARPA funds to be used, they have to be used for an eligible purpose if they are considered ARPA straight up, ARPA funds directly. And there's a whole guidance, lots of guidance on how those are determined. And so I have spent the last few days trying to beef up my knowledge of what constitutes eligible so that as you dialogue and if you come up with additional ideas, then I'll be able to respond. Would that need to be revenue replacement or would that be ARPA? Based on the knowledge that I have, and then I'd confirm it with our consultants to make sure that we're covered and won't be at cross purposes with the regulations. For it to be ARPA dollars, the expenditures need to be related to the pandemic or to a population that was disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So in most cases, what that means is that it's in a qualified census tract or it directly serves low income groups that are considered as presumed, based on the federal government regulations, presumed to be disproportionately affected by the pandemic. So they've kind of given us some guidelines on that. And this becomes important in terms of how the dollars shake out. The end category or the key categories is that the end use of a project, if it is a capital project, the end use of that project has to directly benefit improving health outcomes. Again, this is ARPA money related to the pandemic. So there needs to be like a nexus, a connection and they have a lot of latitude with that, to be honest, but there has to be a connection made in a write-up that we have to submit that has to be documenting how we saw that as a connection. And let me give you an example. So a playground would be directly related to health outcomes because children would be getting outside, getting fresh air, improving their health in general. Whereas a sidewalk, even if it's in a park, would not qualify under their regulations. It gets convoluted a bit, but it's got to be something that has more of a direct connection, and a reasonable person would say, yeah, that benefits children directly. Could you make the argument, well, the children walk on the sidewalks? Yes, but that's more indirect. And so just trying to make sure we don't get cross purposes with the federal regulations. That's the advice that they've given. Certain capital expenditures, though, were specifically called out in the regulations. Anything to do with water, sewer, storm sewer, or internet broadband were automatically qualified. It didn't matter where they happened. And so the projects that we're doing, for example, in Bonner Springs is a sewer project, and it directly qualified for ARPA dollars, okay? Because they had called that out specifically. They did not call out things like roads. They did not call out things like park improvements, and that's where you have to get into this analysis a little bit, or even bridges, and that's where the revenue replacement comes into play. But before I talk about that, and I know this gets confusing, but a key thing too, and this is a timing issue, is that for ARPA dollars, all of our bids that we would do have to follow the federal procurement rules. And they have to include certain provisions in the bid documents that go well above what our current processes would call for. So we have to go through that process for the ARPA dollars, okay? The ones that are considered straight ARPA. Revenue replacement is a term that you probably have heard used. And what is revenue replacement is a mathematical calculation, okay? It essentially was looking at what revenue we could reasonably argue back in the pandemic, back from 2020, was lost because of the pandemic. Okay, so think, for example, people didn't go out and buy stuff at stores because they weren't going out and restaurants were closed, so you lost sales tax revenue. So there was a whole process that was very regulated that went through and calculated what is the revenue lost, and then ARPA dollars could be used for revenue replacement. Okay, that has come forward over the years. It goes down each year. Okay, but they do a calculation every year based on the same initial premise. And that's something that our consultants do for us. And the revenue replacement number for 2023 is $4.5 million. Okay. Why is that important? Is because there's more flexibility with the revenue replacement dollars. Okay. So they don't have to follow the ARPA eligibility, all that stuff I was just talking about over there in terms of it has to be directly related to a health outcome. It has to be a population disproportionately affected by the pandemic. You don't have to have those qualifiers, but you do have to still follow our own procurement process. And you do have to have it under contract by December of 24. Okay, or designated in some way. There are some ways around that we can talk through, but to not overly complicate it for tonight, the essence of this slide, although it's a lot of detail, is that of the 8.8 million we have for reallocation, 4.5 can be used for revenue replacement initiatives. That is less stringent and more flexible. But the rest of it, the other, 4.4 or 4.3, has to be, 4.3. Sorry. That fancy math gets me every time, right? It has to be used for ARPA projects, ARPA eligible projects. Okay, so that's why that's important. And so when we had our meeting last week and questions were raised about, well, what about this project or this initiative? The answer I gave was it depends. And it depends because of what other adjustments we're doing. Okay, I can answer for you, is X eligible as ARPA or is it eligible as revenue replacement? Okay, I can't answer that. I'll want it confirmed just to protect us and protect our interest in the case of an audit. But it depends on what we do with the rest of the dollars. And we want to use all the dollars. So we know we've got to have some stuff that is ARPA specific. Okay, which again makes sense. That's what the money was intended for. The feds gave it to us to respond to a pandemic. Okay, so this is what we recommended last Thursday. We had provided a memo that outlined what we were recommending. And I have it divided here between the items that are ARPA projects that we can qualify as an ARPA initiative, which remember, I need to use some of those reallocated funds for that purpose. And then those that are not ARPA projects, okay, and they have to be revenue replacement. Again, all of these have a time ticker on them. So time is of the essence. We have to bid a number of these things or get them under contract. And I'm going to talk again, I'm going to try to be quick, but I want to talk through what led us to these recommendations because we did not provide that to you last week. We just simply said, here's the recommendations. But when we had our discussion on May 30th with the commission, we asked at that time that if any commissioners, we said, we believe there'll be money available for reallocation. If you have ideas, let me know so I can do some pre-work and check and see what's eligible and we can start categorizing it. And some of you did that. And I've got information about those. And then the second thing is because in the budget, we were unable to fund capital projects by and large because of our budget constraints. I asked the departments for what are your recommendations in terms of these dollars. And that was what led to some of these recommendations as well. I did not ask the subrecipients, okay, the agencies that you all had awarded, because between May 30th and now, I had gotten information that they're back on track and they're going to get done. And we're going to spend that roughly $12 million, all but a small amount as originally intended by the commission. So we did not solicit any information from those subrecipients because we're just charging ahead with let's get done what we've already had you under contract for. So that's where this list came from. So when you categorize it in terms of the types of things we were looking for, again, remember, we're driven by what's it eligible for. So can we come up with all the items that we need as a community that are ARPA eligible? And what can we get under contract by December of 24? So that was a guiding premise for us as we looked at the different ideas that were on the table. Under public health, which again, that was where a lot of the funding originally, the reallocation funding came from that category. And so a number of those projects, and I'll talk in more detail here in a moment, but came from that category. We looked at capital projects since in the budget, we weren't able to fund capital projects and tried to identify ones for specific reasons that elevated up to the top. With public safety, the same thing. And then just an overarching financial sustainability goal of looking at what the needs are. And we already know that we are very concerned in the county general fund about a couple of the departmental budgets and the reductions that we made in terms of the jail funding for their outside contractors and then the dispatch funding for overtime. We are working with the departments, working aggressively to meet those goals, but as a contingency, we felt like it would be prudent to set aside some additional dollars because as you might remember, the county general fund does not have a strong fund balance. It's, our goal is 25% and we are well below that. And so that was the thinking, is that this would set some funding aside for us to be able to try to hedge against what if those jail costs do continue to go up, with the best hopes that we will be able to manage that, but just recognizing we're a bit concerned. And in fairness, the sheriff has raised, his hand about that because in many ways, it's not something that the sheriff's department can control. It's really based on the court system and how fast cases are disposed of and so forth. So for the public health projects that we recommended, and the departments are here if you have more specific questions, but the largest one that we were recommending was a very proactive response that the directors brought forward to respond to a current TB outbreak, is what they call it, in our community. They have written up a documented connection between, and I said ARPA, I meant to say COVID and TB, and how there is a connection between those two, and that is a public health issue, so it does qualify. And right now we have it varies, but 40 to 50 cases in Wyandotte County. The department's actively working with the federal CDC, with the state Department of Health and Environment, and the surrounding communities, which also have some cases, although in lower numbers than we have. They want to be proactive in order to get in front of this so that it doesn't become a widespread issue. And the departments come up with a plan where they would contract with nurses and caseworkers that would then go out and do proactive testing in the community for TB. And then when an individual is identified, work with that individual very one-on-one, administering medicine, making sure they get the daily medicine, making sure they quarantine properly. It's a very labor-intensive process. But in terms of meeting the December 24, it would be a contract for staffing services that would be in place to have these people to help respond to this outbreak. And so it would meet the requirement of December 24, and it meets ARPA straight up requirements. Okay, it doesn't require revenue replacement. The second area is the car seat program. And this was an initial program that was successful. They had a couple of, I only got a quick second to read some follow-up on this afternoon, late afternoon. But they had some really good programs for women and infants in the community. And the request was to do 50,000 for an additional 250 car seats for low-income persons. The department may want some flexibility in that. So it could be for potentially other types of equipment for infants, not just the car seats, to be more flexible. But the gist of their request is that it would be for low-income households and women and infants. And 50,000, it would qualify for ARPA, and we would have it purchased basically by December 24. And hopefully distributed, because if it's a need in the community, we want to get that out to the community as fast as possible. The third thing that the department had requested funds for was in response to the Duchesne Health Clinic closing. That was one of our safety net clinics, and they had about 1,300 clients that they were assisting directly. And so the health department has been trying to help navigate these clients to other safety net providers. And there's several others in our community, but trying to make that connection so that those folks find, access to healthcare, and they may not even know about these other clinics. They just know that they went to Duchesne. Well, now Duchesne is closed. So the goal is to help those people connect with these other organizations, and we would either contract with a person to do that or contract with an agency to do that, because what we don't want to do is create positions that then have to end, within a number of months. But we would estimate that, this would be funding to assist these 1,300 people, either through a person contracted or through an agency contracted to do that. But that would be the function and the purpose. Again, these are all eligible for ARPA, and they are direct services to those populations. So it easily qualifies. Under the capital projects, so we have 3 park projects that we were bringing forward. And there's various qualifications with these different projects. So the Heathwood Spray Park is a reconstruction. There is a spray park there now, but it is closed. And it really, the repairs were about 150,000 or 145,000. And it's 20 years old. So they really felt like we need to just completely, bring it up to modern standards and reconstruct it. So the request was 500,000, which is comparable to what another spray park recently bid out at. Heathwood is not in a qualified census tract, but so it's revenue replacement dollars. And it was in lieu of doing some of those pool improvements, while they get a bigger plan together in terms of the broader picture for the pool. And the spray parks have just been very, very popular, and benefit, the communities really throughout the whole region, not just in those neighborhoods. It's a destination. People go to those parks with their children. The second one is Boston Daniels Park. So that is in a qualified census tract, but there are portions of this project which are not eligible for ARPA. So that's why it's classified as revenue replacement. It has to be both. You can't just say, well, it's in the qualified census tract, which is a low to moderate income census tract. It has to be both. And in this case, some of it is reconstructing sidewalks, putting in a shelter, reconstructing some of the rock walls and the retaining walls in that park. This was originally planned to be funded through CDBG, and about 150,000 of CDBG money was spent on improvements or is set aside for improvements on this park. The rest of it has to do with an administrative process that our community development department needs to go through to update their plan, their use of funds plan, basically, for CDBG. So the ask was, in order to keep this project moving forward, there's been a lot of community involvement and excitement about this park. Even though it's a very small park, it's a very important park. And so the ask was, let's go ahead and finish out this project while we get our plan updated and approved by HUD, because we don't know how quickly that's going to occur. That's kind of an unknown. So it's designated as revenue replacement, and it would allow us to complete the project as originally envisioned through that community process. The next one is the Eisenhower Community Center HVAC, which you would think HVAC sounds like that would be qualified, but it's not. Because it's not in a qualified census tract. So that particular park. So it's revenue replacement. But we were able to do 4 other community centers with ARPA funds in the plan. Those purchase orders have actually been entered and those projects are being done. This was the one that wasn't on the original list, but it's in dire need of having HVAC. And so the ask was to add this on as a revenue replacement, in particular the gymnasium. It is heavily used, the Eisenhower Gymnasium. The actual other building up top, not used nearly like the gymnasium is, but that is heavily used and it is dire need of a replaced HVAC system. The next area is transit projects. So a couple of thoughts about the transit projects. So we were proposing 30 of those be replaced, and we would only do the ones that are in the qualified census tract. So they have to be in the location. And because in a general sense, public transit serves low income, we can qualify this as straight ARPA. We don't have to use those revenue replacement dollars because it's serving one of those disproportionately affected populations. So it's like all of these tests and hoops that you have to jump through. But another thought on this, not related to the regulations, but just the community, is that as we think about the World Cup coming to our community, this is an example of one of our existing bus stations that we have currently. Many of them are very dilapidated, broken plexiglass type panes. They've clouded over due to sun damage. And so they're just very, not aesthetically pleasing. And so to the right is an example of what the transit department has recommended for replacement. And that's more of a mesh, metal mesh that can be easily cleaned. It can be repainted. If there was graffiti, it won't be broken. So it's a more durable option and just would really add a lot of beautification to our community. So we would look at prioritizing the qualified census tracts, which are basically in the downtown area, but it does extend pretty far over to the east. And then we would most of it's along State Avenue. If you want to see the actual locations, there's a link there and you've got the PowerPoint that you can see a map that actually maps those out for you. So you can see like what routes. Most of them are along State Avenue and the major thoroughfares basically. The second thing on there from transit was there was a need identified. They really need to replace 3 of their buses. We weren't able to fund that in the budget. So as a revenue replacement project, we recommended 2 buses. Again, with the thinking of transportation is going to be very important with the World Cup. So we do want to make sure that we have reliable buses that also are up to date. And so we can't qualify that as ARPA because those buses go community run, right? So they have to be both in the qualified census tract and serving the lower income. All right. So in this case, it couldn't be ARPA, but it could be revenue replacement. And so we just in prioritizing the suggestion for your consideration was to do 2 of those since we weren't able to do any in the budget. Up on the top, on the right-hand side, there were 2 projects that we recommended that are more building type projects. One of them is Willa Gill for the replacement of that facility currently downtown, land and design. There's other funding, I know you all know, that's available for that project in addition to this, because it will cost more than the $2 million. But we would be able to qualify that as ARPA because it's in the qualified census tract and the focus, the clientele is to help the homeless. So it qualifies for ARPA. Then the second one is the Vernon School capital improvements, and we recommended $500,000. They've identified more than $3 million in needs of capital needs. We were able to just again, kind of juggling the numbers, put in $500,000. It does qualify for ARPA because it's in a qualified census tract, and we currently use that as one of our sites for Meals on Wheels, and seniors are a pre-qualified population for ARPA dollars. So that's how it qualifies as ARPA. Okay. So the next page is looking at the other projects that we had recommended under the public safety category. We brought forward a few recommendations. There's not a lot of money recommended for this. Just as a quick reminder, out of the total 8.8 million, the projects listed here are only about 349,000. So the first one is to add a modular building out at the animal control shelter. They are currently at capacity every single day and having to foster animals as well. They do not have the ability to separate animals at their current space. So if you have a sick animal, there's no place to quarantine them, to separate them from the other animals. And it's caused a significant issue. There's no place to do surgery such as spay and neuter on the animals, or have a vet space that gives them the ability to provide some on-site medical care to the animals. And it would add some capacity to the shelter. As I said, they're constantly full. I've got those numbers. If I can look them up if you'd like, or if you don't already know them. I do recall that they've had to really expand their fostering program, and they have over 50 animals fostered in the community daily. Just simply don't have the space for what the demand is. The second thing, and that project was $113,000. The second project for the police department was to purchase an ATV or UTV to assist the foot patrol in the downtown area. And the idea was to be able to more efficiently patrol alleyways, to patrol the downtown area, and have a public presence of the police department in our downtown area to promote public safety. It would not replace what they do downtown, but it would help supplement it. And that cost would be $36,000. Those two are revenue replacement, because while they are in a qualified census tract, they are not targeting specific populations. It's benefiting the whole business district downtown, and animals are not a pre-qualified population of ARPA dollars. So these have to be revenue replacement. The sheriff's office, one of the capital projects we were not able to include and fund was to replace some of the kitchen equipment that needs to be replaced. They have equipment that's 6 to 13 years old. They have a few newer pieces, but they're feeding 450 to 480 inmates daily, and that's 3 meals a day. So it is heavily used equipment for serving meals. And so you don't get the life out of those equipment pieces like you would maybe in a different circumstance, because they're used so much for so many people. That has to be revenue replacement. There's specific prohibitions about using ARPA dollars for jails in particular, so it has to be revenue replacement. And then finally is just from the financial sustainability piece, was looking again at the revenue replacement for the fund balance for $1 million, the grant match for leaving some of the dollars essentially for grant match to continue to leverage those dollars. We again originally set aside $3.5 million, have been able to get grants. We've used about $1.3 million. But with all of the needs that we were seeing, we thought it might be prudent to put those dollars back on the table to be considered for reallocation, while keeping some dollars aside for some of these smaller grants. You can see there which grants, how those dollars were allocated into what projects, but they're relatively small projects or small matches that we've been able to leverage other dollars. And so because it's been successful, we wanted to keep a few of those dollars in place for future grants. So that's what led us to what we recommended, was really what's qualified, how much money do we have in total? 8.8 million. How much of it has to be used for ARPA versus revenue replacement? Revenue replacement's 4.5. And what can we get done, meaning under contract, by December of 24? So those were our guiding principles. There's all sorts of things we could hypothetically do, but whether or not in 4 months we can get those dollars committed under contract and follow the bidding processes we would have to, was really a driving factor for us. And so with that, that's the background on what led us to what we recommended, and why we didn't go too far into the subrecipient discussion, because the dynamics really changed from our meeting we had and my update in May, where we weren't sure, are they going to be able to get their dollars spent? To they've all really come up with action plans. I'm really proud of the work that all of them have done. We have 9 agencies that are 98 to 100%, 98% to 100% done. And everybody else has a plan of action to get their initiatives completed. And they've been delayed in some cases for many of the same reasons some of our projects have, with turnover in staff or cost of construction. You know, there's been different reasons why some of those weren't happening as quickly maybe as what they originally thought, but they have put together a very reasonable plan to get their projects done, because that was the direction we gave iParametrics was, look, it's not good enough to just say, you know, I promise we'll get it done, because after December of 24, anything that we ultimately designate, we don't get another chance to reallocate it. Okay, whatever we say for December of 24, then that is what we're stuck with. All right, so because that it has to be under contract by December of 24, unless the feds came up with another exception, but nobody believes that's going to happen. Mostly because we're now going into 25 and we're 3 or 4 years past a pandemic. And these tax dollars that were given to communities were for a pandemic response, to keep people employed, to assist households that were disproportionately impacted, to do some projects that would benefit public health. And so that need has changed over time. And so there's a desire for accountability of the dollars and make sure that we get them spent. And we want to adhere to that. We very much want to spend all of these dollars well before December of 26, but we don't have a choice about December of 24. So that's kind of the update. As you all discuss, I've got a spreadsheet that I can pull up, and then as you discuss, and if you come to consensus on different items, because our hope is that we'll get to some consensus tonight. Because if it has to be bid, we have to write a scope, we have to get it out advertised, and we have to award the contract. So it'll allow us to move these things around based on your consensus. So that we can keep track of what's revenue replacement, what's ARPA. I know, for example, we had the conversation last week, what about the neighborhood grants? And that is something that we could do. The only caveat to that is we would have to really focus to get those under contract, like get them awarded and to the different neighborhoods, like they would have to apply for whatever it is that they want to use the dollars for. And we'd get them under contract for that. It could be maybe they're doing a cleanup day in the spring. That's okay, as long as we get them under contract by December. So that 40,000 though, that would have to come from revenue replacement. Okay, so I can plug that in if there's consensus on that. And then we just have to figure out what to take it away from. Same with, there was discussion from Commissioner Davis about the Eisenhower football field and track. And that's one that after the last update in May, I'd asked if you have any ideas. He did raise that as an idea to replace that. Eisenhower Park is not in a qualified census tract. So it has to be revenue replacement, and that project is roughly $1 million. And so if that was one of the projects that the commission decided to do, we just have to figure out then what do we not do? Okay, but it goes on that column, or there may be new ideas that you all have. And if so, that's okay. I'll do my very best. Like I said, I've tried to make sure I have a good working understanding of what qualifies for ARPA versus revenue replacement. And so we can kind of keep track of that. And then I'll get that confirmed. And if we have to regroup, then I would follow up with David to have more discussions with the group. So that's the presentation, and we're hoping for some direction so that, again, we can, you know, whatever the pleasure is of the commission and the mayor of how to spend these dollars is great. We tried to come up with recommendations based on known needs, what would qualify, what are emerging health issues, and things that we can get done under contract by December of 24. So that was our guiding principles, but we do understand there may be other priorities. And so We just ask that we get some direction on as much as possible so that we can get some work going in order to make sure that we get as much of this, if not all of this, under contract.
Thank you. Commission, this will be two parts. We're going to move from the presentation into kind of a working session now, based on what our CFO had recommended. So if you choose to keep everything the same, that's fine. If you want to move monies around, that's fine too. What will occur once you all come to a consensus to basically solidify the will of this commission, I will ask for a motion to approve what you all recommend. So the administrator and staff can move forward legitimately in dispersing these dollars. The second part to that, there will be another vote kind of in line with the meeting we had last week. We can't really talk too much about location, but it will deal with the will of Gill. I need you all to give me a vote that will direct the administrator and staff to move forward with the information you had last week on Willa Gill, so we can get that project started if that's the will of this commission. So we'll go into the working session, and hopefully we can get to where we need to be in short order. And I'm not going to call you out individually, but I know I have Commissioner Townsend, Commissioner Burns, Commissioner Bynum on deck, and you can go in that order. So Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. This was a good overall presentation, but before we go into the session, I had some questions specifically about some of the fundamentals that were brought up, particularly with the 150,000 that was kind of given back from the pool and went into this. So I see we have our Parks Director here, so I wanted to ask some questions so everybody could hear that.
And that's fine. It's Q&A and working. So you can take time asking questions and kind of helping get you to where you need to make an informed decision. So this is your time.
Oh, good. All right.
Good evening.
Good evening, Ms. Ferrara. And again, Dr. Knieven, great overview, especially with differentiating what needs to go into the revenue replacement bucket and what can go to specifically named items. So my first question or concern had to do with the give back, correct me if I'm wrong, with the 150,000 from Parkwood Pool. There are several things I can name right now that need to be done for next year, small things, but given in mind our revenue, not revenue replacement, but our current stance for just the regular budget. The last thing I would want to do, since we have money available, we're talking about a pool that's in a qualified census tract, serving a population disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. So we've got those things going on. So I am thinking of the umbrellas, the water life jackets. We have hardly any of those. Some were actually 5-finger discounted out of there this year. We would need if this is already in our regular budget, let me know, but I don't want us to lose this opportunity to have those things taken care of. We need the pavement striped. There was newly laid pavement several years ago, but that needs to be striped. My understanding from what Dr. Knieven just presented, that type of thing may fall in revenue replacement. I don't know if it doesn't directly impact health and safety. Whatever category it falls in, I just want to make sure those things are going to be covered for next year before that money is allocated anywhere else. It's currently under Parkwood Pool. So somewhere between this money that's available, ARPA for, reapportionment, and our budget, I want to make sure that those things are taken care of. Can they be taken care of under a regular budget? Or should we be holding some of this 150,000 back to take care of those things? That's the first one.
Yes, so great questions, Commissioner. So I will say the parking lot has been striped. We were able to get that done just before the end of season.
Okay.
So drive by there and check it out. Things like the life jackets and the umbrellas, we do have funding in our operating budget. We purchased several life jackets this year. It is something that we kind of do often. We plan for that in our operating. I will say the 150,000 originally was, the request originally was to replace the fencing around the perimeter of the pool.
Mhm.
As many of you know, we went through a aquatic study I believe it was last spring, last fall, and looking forward to getting that information before the commission. There's some really good information in there, some really good data about the capital needs of the pool and overall budget items and how we should be planning moving forward. I think that the recommendation to repurpose the funds, when asked to provide recommendations from each department, we knew that also this season, Heathwood Spray Park also sprung up as a challenge. We did have to close the spray park. It was not able to operate this summer, as you all know. It's a request that's also up here. And also given the timeline with needing to encumber the funds by the end of the year, and also knowing that we fully anticipate and expect a larger conversation around aquatics around the pool to happen, staff brought that forward as a recommendation. You're absolutely right. There's a lot of items that we could spend $150,000 on at Parkwood. We do have some existing data on what that could be. But I will say it would probably take or it would warrant some conversation to be able to drive that decision. And staff felt like it would be better suited to have those conversations before maybe going in and making some of those larger investments. And so repurposing those funds, it looks like possibly maybe towards the spray park was the staff's recommendation.
Well, let me ask this. You're talking about that live vests have already been purchased. How much have we purchased? There were less than, 10 the last time I was up there about mid-season.
I can check. I do know we had an issue with people walking off with the life jackets. It
Mhm.
happens often. But I can check and see how many life jackets were purchased for an exact number. I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay. How many do you normally want to start off with at the beginning of the season?
I think we usually have about a dozen.
Hmm. I would think we'd want to have at least 50. I would think, just to start off the season with. As you say, they're getting old. Unfortunately, some people left with some, and we're going to crack down on that with security. We're not going to, allow that or allow people to come back into the pool behind that. I just want to make sure that anything we need to start off this season, next season with, we don't let funds we already have that would qualify get away from that. The chairs, we need more chairs around there. So these are things that I would ask staff to go back and make sure that we have and don't scrimp, on it. So that we're, well protected. Also, somewhere in that budget, I would like to see for the lifeguards, there ought to be provisions that water is supplied to them. Those kids are sitting in, extreme heat. And I know I brought things up there. I think one of the other contractors did, but that ought to be something at minimum we have budgeted for that I'd like to see also. And we've got funds that would qualify for that. So if you could look into those things, I'd appreciate that. The chairs, vests, refreshments for the lifeguards, at least water, some, energy bar, something. Dr. Knieven, I see you.
Yes, so the chairs, the life jackets, those types of things would qualify, but the water would not qualify. That would need to be something in the operating budget, certainly something they can take and incorporate, but the ARPA dollars wouldn't be able to be used for that.
And not as revenue replacement.
No, because it all has to be contracted by December of 24. I suppose they could buy a whole bunch of water
Yeah.
at a time and store it if that was the desire of the commission. But again, that would solve the problem one time for one season. And it probably is something that you'd be looking for be incorporated to the operations ongoing, I would assume. But certainly something we could look at for buying a bulk.
Okay, if you could look into that, because that directly in 90-degree heat, teenagers, that impacts life and safety, health and safety. So we could look at that. The other thing for clarity, now I got from the presentation Dr. Knieven just gave, switching to Boston Daniels Park, the crumbling walls would be taken care of as revenue replacement dollars now. Is that correct?
So there are three entrances, as you are probably aware, to the park. The only entrance that was included in the scope as a bid alternate is the east entrance of the park. It's expensive work, and even given the funding that was available, it wasn't feasible to put all three in, given the other priorities for that we identified as the community. But the east entrance was included in the scope as a bid alternate.
Okay, and that's the one that's crumbling all the time. The other thought I had with regard to using that 150,000, which, is designated for park, there are two other like crumbling walls in the Parkwood area, one on the west side, right there at 10th and Laurel, and the other further down at the entrance to where you would go into the main shelter house there. Those things have been crumbling for years. We have money. Now, I'm sure that would qualify. So I'm saying I would like to see the numbers reworked so that we don't let these dollars get away from things that have been in need of repair for years. So that is my request for those before we start giving away money. Those are things in the purview of parks that, we need to get taken care of, and this is the opportunity to get it. All right, thank you.
Before the next commissioner,
I'm sorry?
no, that's.
Oh,
Commissioner.
thank you.
Thank you. CFO, could you pull back up the allocation chart? I think that'd be helpful. That slide. Yes, that one there. Thank you. Just for clarity and talking to our administrator and just help me out, Ms. CFO. You see that county general fund balance? That's $1 million that just was set aside. It wasn't allocated. It goes in the general fund. But that is monies that can be used if this commission so chooses to do so for various projects. So there is that $1 million there that's residual. Am I correct, Ms. CFO? If you choose to allocate that towards other things as not to take from something to fund something else, you do have that $1 million there that can be drawn down if you choose not to have it remain in the county's general fund. So just food for thought. You want to weigh in on that, CFO?
Yes, that's accurate. So if we wanted to, for example, still do Heathwood, but also do some additional pool improvements that were just articulated, or maybe some additional improvements at Boston Daniels, we could reduce the general fund balance number to provide some funding for that. We would ask for a little bit of latitude from you all to be able to work up some estimates so that we'd know how to divvy that up. But if you gave direction, take it from here and put it towards that purpose, we could then share back an updated list. So we could come up with those estimates.
Thank you. And then right below that is grant match. That 485,000 is also available. So you've got about almost 1.5 million that you could kind of play with if you choose to do so. So I wanted to throw that out there so you all can make an informed decision. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. One more thing on the Parks and Rec side. And I know we talked about this. I wanted to see, still want to see the cracks in that basketball court at Edgerton taken care of. I can't remember the estimates that were given, but again, this seems like a good time to take care of that. Again, kudos to Parks and Rec for the beautiful job done at Quindaro. So we've got at Edgerton a court that's going on 12 years old now, and there was nothing there, so that was a good job too. But that directly impacts in a qualified census tract. That could be a health issue because we don't want our next Steph Curry or LeBron James falling on the cracks there. So that's something I'd like to see from some of these funds, somewhere we've got the money that should be identified and taken care of, even if we do a better job in a couple of years. I forgot when you said that those things need to be replaced, but right now it's not really safe as it is, and we can do something about that now. So again, thinking about that $150 that Parks and Rec already has. So thank you, Mayor. So I'm thinking about the 150,000 already identified with Parks. That's where I was coming from, but that's good to emphasize again. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Burns, then it'll be Commissioner Bynum, and then Commissioner Lopez, and then Commissioner Hill. And I'm sure Commissioner Burrows is going to want to weigh in as well. So we'll go in that order.
Thank you, Mayor. I couldn't be here last Thursday evening, so I'm playing catch up here. So I think some of the things that were said last week, I need to get answered here. Shelley, on the capital projects, when it says not in the qualified census tract, does that mean that 500,000 is not qualified to be funded?
It's qualified to be funded from revenue replacement.
Okay.
So it's a designation they do to ARPA dollars. And some of it has more stringent requirements than others. So the revenue replacement, you have more latitude with. And the Heathwood, for example, not in a qualified census tract. So it has to be revenue replacement because of where it's physically located.
Okay, and then the same thing for the Eisenhower HVAC system?
That's right.
Okay. And so the transit projects would qualify.
The shelters do because
Yes.
we would only replace the ones that are in the qualified census tracts.
Okay. The Willow replacement, that 2 million can be used
That's
without a
right.
problem.
From ARPA,
And the Vernon School,
correct?
okay. And then the 2 requests by the police department can be funded,
They can. Those have to be revenue replacement
okay.
under the rules, but they can be funded.
And the sheriff's
Yes.
equipment,
Mhm.
okay. Thank you. That was my questions. I don't take as long, some people.
I'll go next. I have a whole variety of questions and we just let Ms. Bush walk out the door, but I think she'll be back. So I'll try to maybe leave my transit questions to the end. First of all, thanks for all the work. You went straight from budget into ARPA reallocation, so I know that your office is always working. You know, back when, first of all, to the 3 commissioners that weren't here for all of this ARPA discussion, you know, beginning in 21, and then all of these sub-recipients on all the work we did to allocate those funds. I'm sorry, because I feel like you are playing catch up and you've done a pretty good job of it. But, you know, by all means, it's extremely complicated. And I think they've made it as easy to understand as they possibly can. But back when we first started working on this, we held a fairly large community conversation, bringing the community to the table for their identification of what they thought the needs were within the guidelines, understanding that we were mitigating a pandemic. And the top three that came from that were housing, mental health, and childcare. Those were the three that came to the top of those community sessions. I think, somewhat satisfied because two of those three are being handled somewhat through this reallocation process. Willett Gill, obviously is about supporting that population that's either unhoused or precariously housed. So I do think that's really important. Mental health, I think, is being somewhat addressed through some of these reallocations. Childcare, we don't seem to have given any particular attention to that right at this point, which isn't to say we can't, but I am pleased that, two of the top three are somewhat being addressed with this remaining money. And of course, I think our public health department is probably always looking for ways to support any kind of mental health efforts. So you need to always factor that in. I have a variety of questions. And since Ms. Ferrara is at the table with the microphone, I'm going to start with parks. And Ms. Bush, I have a couple of questions, really just one question for you. But I'm going to start with Boston Daniels, and I want to talk about Parkwood. So with the allocation that we're contemplating of 711,000 to Boston Daniels, is that going to repair that wall you spoke of? One of the walls? How much is that?
It's possible. For clarity, this project did go out to bid and we do have proposals that we are reviewing. So it's an active RFP process.
Okay.
But I will say that the east entrance was included as a bid alternate, and we are really hopeful that if fully funded, we would be able to address that.
So I guess let me back up. For $711,000, what do we hope to accomplish at Boston Daniels?
So great question. That is the 711. The remaining funding that we are requesting goes towards the total project cost. I would say, I know speaking with Commissioner Townsend, the kind of the main priorities, if you will, or the large ticket items of the scope would be replacing the playground that's there, and also installing rubber surfacing or turf, something that's inclusive, adding a picnic shelter to that park, addressing the sidewalk infrastructure inside the park, as well as one of the entrances off Waverly, so creating an ADA access, and then also some issues as it relates, or not issues, beautification efforts, and then also there's a lot of site work. If you've been to Boston Daniels, you can tell it's a pretty sloped site. So there's a lot of site work that would need to be done, and so some mobilization in there as well.
What's the overall entirety of the project cost at Boston Daniels?
So if fully funded, it'll be just a little over $1 million that will have been invested into Boston Daniels Park. If you can remember, last year, the commission did approve $150,000 in the parks budget as well to support the project. And so in total, if this is fully funded, when it's all said and done, it'll be about a little over $1 million of investment from the unified government. And I will say that there's also been other investments made. I know the Boston Daniels Corporation has done a great job of getting some funding as well, and are also in some discussions with other community stakeholders that are interested in funding the sculpture. The sculpture is not part of the scope that we are working on, and a lot of that is because of the restrictions with the CDBG dollars, and so it didn't get included, but we are as part of the scope of our piece, and including installation of the footings for the future, hopefully the monument. And so I know that that group is actively working with potential funders in the community to get that piece funded.
I appreciate the project. I truly do, and I don't want to be misunderstood. And I appreciate that it's kind of a public-private partnership. So that's all well and good. My concern is that I want to pivot to the Parkwood pool because you did sit down with Commissioner Townsend and I in May and show us the conditions assessment of the pool. You talked to us about the fact that, well, the analyst that produced the report identified that the pool is losing 1 million gallons of water over the season of swimming, and that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. You talked about the replacement of the valve system, the filtration, the pump, the motor, and the strainer. And that was 1 to 1.4 million potential cost for that. And it strikes me that that is an important potential use of these dollars. And I know that you've prioritized Heathwood over Parkwood Pool. I don't know how I feel about that, but I do have a technical question. I don't know how it's possible that Heathwood is not in a qualified census tract. It's at 9th and parallel. So I don't know how it's possible that that's not a qualified census tract. Alan, did you have a?
You can pull up the map. There's a HUD qualified census tract map, and it is a little.
I'm looking at it. Yeah,
Um,
I'm looking at it.
For that, so I.
So
say
for
by HUD,
whatever reason, this one singular tract
correct,
in the middle of all these blue tracts, that's where it's sitting.
correct.
That's amazing. Nonetheless, I just wonder, do we know usage counts on Heathwood? We know usage counts on Parkwood. How do we know how many kids come and splash around in a spray park?
I mean, that's the age-old question, I think, in the industry is really being able to track usage in parks. I think that that's hard to do. You're right, we don't have hard numbers on any of our splash pads. However, we do know that we received a lot of concerns, frustrations from the community that Heathwood was not open for the summer. It was hard. As you know, we have a lot of needs in the department, and so it's not, staff doesn't not value Parkwood. We absolutely do. It was also a project that came up this year that was unexpected, Heathwood not being able to operate. So, when submitting these recommendations, we really did our best to try to, knowing we're only going to get a limited amount of the pie, to really see, how we could best leverage those dollars. I will say kind of about Parkwood, not that, well, this is actually great news. We were able to address a little bit of the water leak this summer. We did have our maintenance team go in and kind of replace some pretty large valves that seemed to help. However, we do know that the pool is very old, and so it didn't completely stop the bleeding, if you will, but we were able to eliminate and reduce the water loss at Parkwood.
I would, defer to Commissioner Townsend and what she thinks, but for me, Parkwood would certainly merit some consideration here, in whatever category it might fall in. So those are I'm trying to balance, as you did, I'm trying to balance Parkwood Pool, the only public municipal pool for the entire city of KCK. We all know that.
Um,
I'm
Commissioner
gonna,
Bynum, I might add to that as well. I would say if I were to be asked, what would be the most immediate needs of Parkwood? You saw the presentation and the data that was, preliminary presented, and it has the basic, the immediate, and the enhanced improvements. Obviously, starting with the immediate repairs, and some of that is, getting the system on a chemical controller, so it is electronic, and getting it to a different software, if you will, would be some of the places to start with that. So there is good data there to make, I think, some good decisions. But I think we would just want to make sure we have like more discussion, knowing that we haven't went through like the whole report.
I think that, I know we're on a very, quick turnaround because we would want to get whatever we do encumbered, which means we would have to put out bids and they would need to have a pretty quick turnaround. Anyway, I just want to be on the record about Parkwood because I feel like there are things we could do there that we know are needed because we have a study that we paid for that tell us that. And we know how important they are, especially to health and safety issues at that pool. So I am on record for that.
If I might too, just in the Parkwood piece, also there is an effort to seek outside funding for, a large amount. And so that's just kind of, we don't know the outcome of that, but that's kind of out there waiting and.
I'm
that
sorry,
goes-
did you say
like-
there is?
There is, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Right, through federal funding sources. And so the timing doesn't line up very well on that in terms of.
Right.
Those kind of investments. And I think that kind of goes a little bit into Angel's thinking in
Yeah.
terms of how much do you want to commit of this immediate money versus the potential for a longer term solution. And that's where I think in somewhat the Heathwood piece comes out because that's serving the community. I mean, it serves both sides of Parallel, but it's located to the south of Parallel
Mhm.
and serving the Douglas Sumner in that area as the water amenity that's available in that neighborhood.
I appreciate that. Part of my brain's response to that is we know that Parkwood has immediate needs right now. And we have ARPA money right now that we could use right now. So I'll leave it at that. Appreciate that. It would be delightful to receive a huge bucket of federal money and have a beautiful new entire water park. That would be a beautiful thing. Quick question or request to my fellow commissioners. We know that we have 57,000 unused by subrecipients. My request would be again to you all to consider using 39 of that, as the CFO told us last week, to replace the neighborhood grants. It's one small way to give back something that we took in this budget cycle. So I'm just putting that request out there again. We could encumber those funds, as you explained earlier, before the end of the year, allow them to retain 2025 for their small neighborhood grants and let them do the good things that they do. They take a tiny little bit of money and they do quite a bit of good within their neighborhoods for that. So it's just a request to my fellow commissioners. I'm trying to get to the rest of my questions here. Ms. Desiree Bush, a couple things. Back when I was still on KCATA, ordering a bus was like 1.5 to 2 years wait to get a bus. But I guess we could encumber the money by ordering the bus. Is that the situation?
Well, good question, Commissioner Bynum. So for KCATA, they actually own and operate the 40-foot size buses. For us, Unified Government Transportation Department, we operate 25-foot cutaway vehicles. So we have a cooperative agreement with a vendor, and currently I have vehicles on hold with
Oh,
that
good.
vendor. So meaning we can procure it now, and I could have it delivered after retrofitting the vehicle, probably in about no more than 60 days.
Excellent.
If that, I'm sure it'll be less.
Thank you. That's exciting to hear because that's not the way it's working over town. I want to be on the record that I 100% support the animal services auxiliary building. It is desperately needed. I wish we could have an entirely new animal services building, but we can't. But we need that building. So I just want to make sure that I'm on record for supporting that. And Mayor, I'm just curious, or staff, somewhere along the way in this presentation, it crossed my mind, what if the bids, we've got to have a bid process for some of this. What if those bids come in higher than what we think they're going to be here? Like we said, 113,000 for animal services. Is that because we've already put it out to bid and we know what the answers are?
In that case, we got a quote.
Okay.
but we would still need to bid it. So it's, a fairly firm price that they've developed, but we would still bid it. And one of the things, just to answer a more global question, is in any of these that we're putting out to bid, we will pre-think add or deletion options on bids so that we spend all the money, because it works both ways. We want to spend it all, but if it comes in over, then we're going to have to take something out. So we'll be pre-thinking that in our bid processes so that we have some flexibility to make sure that we do spend our dollars.
Thank you, Mayor. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you for the report on this evening. And I just have not too many questions. With the Health Department Spanish speaking piece, does that mean we're hiring several people in the Health Department that speak Spanish? That's gonna be worth $100,000? I'm just asking. Is that what that means?
So it is either contracting or contracting with an agency, like a subrecipient.
Okay.
Because they do that often, because we don't want to hire full-time employees that then we have to turn around and the grant funding ends and then they don't have a position. So this would be accomplished, but it would be managed and directed by the health department. And it would be a Spanish-speaking individual so that they can communicate as I understand it, and Dr. Eli can certainly add to this, a lot of the clients are Spanish-speaking. So they're challenged with understanding what options are available to them. And so this person would be a great point of contact for that community to help get people connected with alternatives.
Okay, thank you. And I just want to be in agreement about the animal service building that definitely we've heard Commissioner Bynum mention, and also want to be in agreement with Commissioner Townsend in regards to Parkwood Park and the swimming pool. And I also want to mention Boston Daniels Park. We received several letters that this week in regards to Boston Daniels Park and the work that has the master plan and all that the park department has done with that team with Boston Daniels. Thank you. And it has had a lot of community surveys that were responded to. So certainly appreciate that and look forward to that whole project being completed and finished. And the Heathwood Spray Park, that was something Mr. Chester Owens mentioned. He was concerned that it wasn't working. So I told him that we were working on that. That would be completed by next summer. Is that correct? So the kids would be able to play out there at the Heathwood Spray Park.
If funded, then yes, we would be able to move forward with getting some plans together to get it back up and running.
Okay, next summer?
If funded, hopefully we'd be able to meet that mark, yes.
Okay, and then the livable neighborhoods, definitely would like to see us fund that whole project with the home repairs opportunities that we have there. I'm not sure, how much were we thinking about? Do you remember, Commissioner Bynum, how much that was? We were,
What we unfunded. was
yes, what we
$1,000.
unfunded. Okay,
But that wasn't part of today's discussion at all, but I'll leave that to
Right.
you.
So two things that were not included in the 25 budget. One was these neighborhood grants. And neighborhoods have applied for grants for an entrance monument or a cleanup day, a variety of things. And that was the 39,000 that I think Commissioner Bynum talked about. There was a home repair fund of 57,000, also not funded, but to remind the commission, we do have home funds and CDBG funds that are UG funds that we are using for home repair. And so there's an alternative solution to that. So it's not like that goes away entirely. It's just funded from those sources, not from the general fund.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to just make sure that, to let my colleagues know that's something that I think we might consider. And also, the mayor mentioned the Willa Gill Center. Definitely would like to see us move forward with that project. It's a great need. And the Mount Carmel folks are just anxious to, find a home. So thank you.
Thank you. I believe it's Commissioner Lopez.
So are these set in stone what you have for the ARPA money?
No,
Is-
what's set in stone is that we have 8.8 million.
Right.
And some of the dollars can be used in a more flexible way than other parts of the dollars.
What I was getting
This
at
is-
is, I think outside the box, I think I live outside the box, but what if, since Indian Springs site has been what it is, why don't we spend a bunch of money on putting, solar panels there and using that because it's part of the utility, part of their ARPA funding. And in a way, we're investing it, but not investing it. Because we can't, we can invest it in certain ways, but that would be a huge investment that would help our utility bills in the long run. And it's actually, it'll be a huge investment for us.
So those
Would-
solar panels could be purchased for that location or wherever from revenue replacement. That's not, for whatever reason, they only approved water, sewer, stormwater, and broadband internet from ARPA dollars straight up. So it'd have to be revenue replacement, but yes, that could be an eligible use of the dollars. If we identified a site and got a bid out very quickly to get a purchase order, basically entered in the system by December of 24. That would be the caveat. That's just the time sensitivity.
If I could chime in, Commissioner, I totally support Indian Springs. It's been vacant for far too long. $27 million, I believe, investment from the unified government for it to be sitting vacant for all these years. To get it back online has been something that I know we all want, along with a lot of our residents. I agree with you on Indian Springs, but that site is currently in an RFP process that's currently under negotiations. And because that's ongoing, it's basically it's under contract, is what I'm trying to say. But I'm not trying to take away from your idea of solar panels, a great idea, but I'm just trying to say that site specifically is currently in negotiations with the unified government. But I can tell you, I do believe that one developer does, part of that proposal does include solar panels. I want to share that, okay?
Yeah, no, I was just trying to figure out a way to really invest in the long run where, it brings us money. It helps us in the end. I think.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you, Mayor. Going back to Boston Daniels Park, again, just to make sure, because I thought I heard some just a little equivocation. I just want to make completely sure that east wall that is crumbling is included in the $711,000 to be repaired, the repair of that wall.
It's included in the scope as a bid alternate, which is an active.
What does that mean, the bid alternate?
So there's a base bid of a scope of, you know, projects that we are confident can get funded. Now, when we go through this process, normally you'll see some bid alternates that gives the vendor an opportunity, the contractor an opportunity to kind of, you know, submit a bid for that to see if we can basically afford to do that bid alternate. Sometimes you'll see that in flat work. If there's more flat work, then we can kind of get a little bit more done. But normally it's not an uncommon process to have alternates when you put a project out to bid. Just so, you know, there's the base bid that we know we can confidently fund. And then if there's vendors or contractors that think they can do the work in a little bit more, maybe for the same amount or less or comparable, then they'll put in for the alternate. So it is included. And like I said, active RFP process, reviewing the proposals, looking at all the base bids as well as the bids with the alternates. We're going through that right now. So I can't sit here and say because it's an active process, but it was included in the scope as an alternate.
Okay, I'm still not clear because one thing that must be done at that park is to have that wall fixed. Right now it's crumbling in the street. So I'm not sure when I hear alternate that connotes to me is this or that. That wall must be fixed, must be fixed. So I hope that's in that 711,000, or as the mayor said, we have the 1 million and I guess you got the grant match. But if we've set aside 711,000, that wall has to be fixed as part of that infrastructure. It's gotta be.
Angel, maybe if you could clear up what is the base of what's included in the base bids? Forget the alternates. What's in the core of in the bid?
Yeah, so what went out, it's a public document, basically was the playground and the surfacing, picnic shelter, site work to include the flat work inside the park with the sidewalks. There's some retaining walls in there, some beautification, you know, trees, flowers, those types of things, and basically mobilization of the site. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we did add I believe three options as alternates in addition to the base bid. So and I'm probably just not explaining this correctly. So if anyone can explain this better, please jump in. The base bid, the contractor has the opportunity to bid on that. And if they think that, you know, they can handle the other projects, they're welcome to submit a price for that. And then staff will review it and say, okay, what can we afford? Oftentimes we'll find, hey, actually, we can get these other things done that we might have thought we couldn't. And then there are times where it's like, actually, you know, our budget is eaten up in the base bid. Does that make sense? So that section of the entrance, the east wall, was included as an alternate. I can't sit here and guarantee that because it is an active process and we do have to go through the RFP and review the proposals based off of what we have available in funding before I can say, yes, it's included, we can afford it, good to go.
I'm still as confused and disappointed if you're telling me that that was not put as part of the base bid. Flowers, all that other stuff is great, but you know, we got to bake the cake before we can decorate it. And that wall crumbling in the street is a foundational piece. All this other beautification is great, but we have to have that infrastructure piece done first. And at this point, I don't know, that's got to be done first. That's all I can say. I have been asking that to be done for years, and we piecemealed it. So I'll just leave it there. I think I've been clear. With regard to funds to kind of reinstate approximately was it 37,000 for the neighborhoods?
39.
39, okay. Did you have in particular where you thought that might come from here?
I would look to the CFO. I mean, it's sitting right now in the subrecipient money that we allocated that is not going to get used by the subrecipients. So I don't know where that would put it.
So
Okay.
we had allocated about the 57,000 that Family Conservancy won't be using to the grant match. So what I would recommend is if there's a consensus, let's fund the neighborhood grants program, that we reduce the grant match amount by the 39,000. And then we reallocate it to that effort if there's consensus to do that. Because that's where those dollars, that's where we plugged them in. Because we didn't feel like we had enough time to go back out to all the subrecipients to make requests. One of them proactively has asked, hey, if there's any money, I'd like it. But we also have 9 that have completed their work and they'd probably like it too. And so just thinking about the time period involved, we didn't go down that path. We just set it aside for grant match, but we could certainly take that money, reduce grant match and set it aside for neighborhood grants and run a quick process for them to apply for the dollars and get them under contract. We get the neighborhood group under contract. They wouldn't have to actually have done the work, but get them under contract by December. So we'd want direction though, because that's, I mean, you know, a neighborhood group's going to need time to talk about what do they want to apply for. And there's a process to decide which ones get approved. So that the Livable Neighborhoods Committee, I believe, has been involved with in the past. So there's some process that would be wrapped around that to get done in 4 months. So
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I just want a clarification. So that brings me to my last point. Since this body has not had the presentation yet about the Parkwood pool, just so we know, and I look forward to that, ask for that. I'm sure it's coming soon. But the one thing that we talked about during that presentation was the filtration system, even if nothing else is done to Parkwood. That is critical. And my recollection is that would take about 1.4 to 1.6 million. So while we have this money there, that's why I didn't particularly mention that in regard to this, because that would totally wipe out all of that money. And what we're talking about now, you know, refunding or restoring some of the neighborhood usage. So that is a whole different thing in and of itself. So I look forward to that presentation so this body can hear it and know the situation that we're currently in. The filtration systems that are put in pools now are automatic. They wouldn't have to test the pH, and if new chemicals are needed, they're automatically put in. From my recollection, that's not what happens to that pool now. Each of those systems are different, but if you have a contamination event, which we did this summer, it affects both pools and you have to shut them down. So just so you know, this is what's to come. But if we wanted to do just the filtration system, that would wipe out that 1.4 here. So the other things I am in support of with the caveats I've already talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Burrows.
Wow. Let's spend it all. That's what I say. Spend every dime we have. That's why we went revenue neutral, because we've got money to spend. The public safety one I'm good with, although the police UTV downtown patrol, I think that the SMID downtown shareholders should commit to putting up some of the revenue to provide that service for downtown. They get a tremendous amount of support from us financially, plus they have their own tax levy to continue to provide service to that area when we're already paying for it. One way I think that if we want to pay for it, then we ought to ask to be reimbursed, even if it's over a 2-year time frame. That gives us a little bit more money to put back into our coffers. Can you tell me why Heathwood Park didn't open this year? The spray
Yes.
park?
Yeah, so Heathwood is a fairly old system. I think it's 20+ years old, and it's having a lot of maintenance issues in the pit. The pit is 8 feet or below. And trying to get maintenance contracted work out to help us is non-existent because they have told us that our pit is unsafe and they won't send any technicians down to service it, and also highly advise that we look to correct that. So looking into correcting that was very expensive. There are a few options that we explored. If anyone was at Clifton, you saw that the pump room is above ground, so we explored, seeing what that would look like. That's about 150,000 just to bring all of the pump system above ground. We also looked at we kind of looked at everything. We looked at trying to better filter out the pump room. It's a really confined space. If you myself were to go down in there, I'd have a hard time turning around. So being able to even excavate that, make it bigger, do whatever needed to do just was not feasible. When you look at the life of the structure, knowing it's 20+ years old and putting about $150,000 into it, staff recommended that that money would also be better spent probably towards just upgrading the system. I will say there was also an issue with the water line. The water line needed to be, well, actually, let me back that up. To bring the system above ground, we'd also have to expand the water line. And so it was my understanding after staff looked into that situation, it'd have to go to a 3-inch because it is it's a filtered system. It's not a pass-through. So there's two different types of spray parks. And to do that, working with BPU to identify what that work would be was also where a lot of the costs would be, because we would have to run the line pretty far to get that work done. So we did look at a few ways to be able to get that fixed, to be able to, continue to utilize that system, but it's going to be a large investment, and it's not that it can't be done, it can, but you're going to be spending that on just the repair, and you're not getting new features, which some of those features are also needing to be replaced as well.
Sounds like it needs a total replacement, not a reinvestment. It needs to be replaced. If we're spending more money on maintenance and not being able to utilize it to the extent that the neighborhoods and the children in the community want to use it, then we're really defeating the purpose. We're throwing more money into something that has long outlived its life. I'm strongly supportive of Boston Daniels Park. I think it's been under funded for quite a while, and it has some historical factors to it that I totally respect. I want to talk about the transit shelters and the transit buses. I'm supportive of that. We need to move people around this community, get them to jobs. I think I've had my conversations with Desiree in reference to what we need to do as far as the benches and the huts. And I know that things that KCATA, the designs are changing, which I think will be more acceptable in our community so that investment. So I'll go on record of saying I'm supportive of that. The Health Department response to TB outbreak. It's $1,055,000. I don't know where that number come from. I don't know if you'd look at the population and put a number to it, but $1 million for 55 people. I can't question it. I'm not a doctor. It just seems a little steep after we went through COVID with 160,000 people in this community. But the Health Department SEEK program, I know a lot of our Rotary clubs and stuff like that have done that in the community. They do their own fundraising, and they've hosted a few of those events throughout our community. I mean, it's a great program. I want to see all kids safely buckled in a vehicle. I just don't know that we need to do it, but if that's the will of the body, so be it. The Health Department's Spanish-speaking navigator, due to the closure of Duchesne Clinic. We have a contract with interpreters, I believe, that the unified government uses. Many of our departments have contracts. Is that not correct?
This is Dr. Caldwell. We do have Propio that we use for translation services.
So is this an extension of that contract? Or is this bringing somebody on full-time to be an interpreter within our clinic? What is that?
No, we're not going to open any new positions. We contract, we give these funds to agency to assist with this translation process. Bear in mind that the Duchenne Clinic had 1,300 patients, and that clinic was closed out of the blue. We didn't have any preparation for that. So you have patients that are on ongoing chronic medical conditions and have no access to care. So that's a severe access issue we are trying to address.
I understand the need for healthcare. We have a number of organizations throughout Wyandotte County that offer Spanish-speaking interpreters. And to put $100,000 into the health department just for one interpreter, two interpreters, it just says Spanish-speaking navigator. Why we can't contract that out somewhere and utilize it within the other funds within the budget. I'm just looking at things here because we're just seeing a bunch of numbers thrown out here and they're all rounded up quite handsomely for everything that we want, but I don't know that we need. And that's what I'm trying to get to. Because if there's money that we can break away, there's been other needs that have been mentioned here this evening that maybe we can slide some money over to. But Mr. Administrator, you were going to answer?
On the Duchenne clinic closure, I believe the population or the number of patients that they left behind is around 1,200. Most of those are Spanish speaking. We don't have the ability to serve those. We have received pleas from the other safety net clinics because I think when Duchenne closed, there was an assumption that all of the rest of the safety net clinics could absorb them. And what we're hearing from the safety net clinics is it's too much. We cannot absorb them and we need to get them to healthcare. And so like Dr. Caldwell said, this came out of the blue, gave 1 month's notice that they're closing, left a population behind, and now we're trying to make sure that they get medical care that they need hopelessly, seamlessly. And so that was one of the disappointments of the Duchenne closure. Regarding the TB outbreak, yeah, you can look at it per patient, but when you look at public health, you can't look at it from a per patient standpoint. TB is a disease that we have all assumed had been eradicated in the United States. Years ago, I remember as a kid in elementary school getting the time tests on my forearms, and then it stopped because there was a decision that it's not prevalent in the United States. Well, we've seen dynamics in the last 20 years of our country. People come and go from other countries and stay here. And they're bringing their disease from their country of where it's not eradicated into a country that's eradicated. So what you're seeing is right now we have identified 40 to 50 people who have positively tested for TB, but we got to do two things. Do whatever we can in a precaution area, working with the population as a whole to keep it from spreading. That means we got to be in the schools. We got to work with certain employers. It's a pervasive program. The second thing that we have to do with this is that certain cultures that we deal with, TB is a stigma. It's like the scarlet letter. And they don't want people to know that they have TB. And one of the ways that they individually keep people from knowing, they will not take their medicine. And therefore, there is a process in which it's, as Dr. Caldwell talked about it, is a labor-intensive effort. Those who have been diagnosed, they get their daily visit to give them the medicine to take, which is part of the precautionary stuff to keep it from spreading. So this is, we're dealing with different cultures that live in our community, and something that's I don't understand, because that's not the way I was raised, and all that. But cultures from other countries that have domiciled here bring their approaches that force us, for the greater good, to keep things from spreading to it's more complicated than what just going to the doctor's office. And that's why it costs $1 million. And so we're looking at this, Eli, what, about an 8-month program?
Yes, and it could be more. And just to give you the current updated numbers, we have 56 now.
Now it's 56.
And it's going up. So I think the best bet we have is to figure the way out to stop it. Because if we don't, it could go out of control, and we could probably end up spending much, much more money than we think now we can spend. So the best choice we have right now is to take action to stop it, or to
Contain it.
contain it. Yeah.
Well, it sounds like we may be on the verge of another epidemic here, in reference to, the high need to keep it curtailed if people won't come forward, take their medicine. Maybe we need to put more money into it and take it out of something else. And then if it's not used, we can pull it back. I mean, these are just suggestions. I'm not trying to be difficult here. I'm just trying to look at these numbers and try to see how we can get the best return on investment. And all I heard tonight was spend, spend, spend. And I haven't heard anything about, we went revenue neutral because there was concerns in the community about taxes. We have a little bit of revenue that we could shore up our budget for emergency purposes. And the health department's emergency, public safety is extremely important. I don't know about an HVAC center. Is Eisenhower one of our centers, or is it attached to the school and public school property?
It's a partnership agreement, but the community center is under Unified Government Parks and Recreation. I will say that the community center portion has 2 rooftop units, HVAC units, and one is in need of replacement very soon.
Okay. The animal control, we've got animals running all over the place. We're not picking them up. I get calls on all the time. I'm sure other commissioners do too. So I guess there's a need there for animal control, but I don't know what we're doing as far as finding the owners of the animals, but we'll pick them up or we won't pick them up. But there's things that go hand in hand with this that I'm really struggling to get my arms around. We found $8 million and we found $10 million worth of need. And so I know we're a community of great need. I've asked for one thing in the last 3 years in my South Side district, and that was a bench to be put in out at Wyandotte County Park for the all-inclusive seating of the families who bring their children in wheelchairs. And I think that park's been there 3 years, now 4 maybe. And we have no bench, but other parks received lots of money. And that bench has still not been purchased, conceptualized, or whatever. And I'm hearing about basketball, I'm hearing about walking trails, I'm hearing about gardens and gazebos. And we just had parks that were just updated throughout the community. And there's been one request for one of our sitting parks, and that's a bench. And it hasn't occurred. Now that bench is extremely important to families who have children that are in wheelchairs that want to sit with their families. And we can't accommodate that in an all-inclusive park. So that would be, I would like to see that bench funded and maybe 2 benches to an all-inclusive park. The Willa Gill replacement, I know we're in negotiations with that. I'm not committed to $2 million for that program. I think we're throwing I think we're throwing a lot of money at something that we haven't had an opportunity as a body to discuss And once we approve this, that money will be there for that. It could be $3 million. It could be $1 million, but we're throwing $2 million at it. So I would like to see us maybe move $1 million of that over into the general fund to hold on to it, maybe give us an opportunity to negotiate. I hear nothing about grants for any of these other programs that we can seek. I see grant funding, but I haven't heard of any grants that were coming forward to assist us. We had 10% of the ARPA funds returned to us that weren't utilized. And here we are 3 months away from the deadline in which they were to be utilized. And it's a little late in the game. So we're panicking that if we don't spend it, how dare we not spend it? But if we have the need, let's spend it on the need. What we don't spend, I'd like to see go into the ending balance to help our reserves so that should we have issues coming forward, we can fund it. And I would ask the body, the neighborhood group, everybody took a cut. The neighbors spoke to us collectively, and we told them, we asked them, you do realize it's going to be tough. And the comment was, yes, go revenue neutral. So we're spending every dime that we have except maybe $1 million for the general fund. Then I already hear $1.5 million, $1.6 million. So we've already spent it and then some. So I guess this is not what I came in to really hear tonight. I came in to seek priorities, to identify what we could utilize and get a return on investment. If Heathwood Spray Park is in need of a total rebuild, then let's move the money somewhere else and let's look at what we can do with Heathwood Park, putting a new quality park in there and not just try to update it. Yes, Angel.
I was just wanting to clarify that's what the request is for. It would be to totally rebuild it. Just clarifying.
500,000 to rebuild it.
Yes, we just did Clifton Park that just opened, and that's about the ballpark of what that project costs to brand new. And so Heathwood would be a brand new rebuild.
Okay. I did receive a message, I'm sure all of you did, about Vernon School. And it has historical significance. It's extremely important. The thing that caught my attention was it provides services to the community. These ARPA funds, it talked about capital and it's under capital projects. And then within the letter itself, it started talking about a community center providing services to the seniors of the community. So I guess I'm a little concerned. Are we going to provide services? Are we going to provide capital? Or are we going to provide both? Because if the services can be provided, or if we're duplicating services, there may be some savings there. Or we may be able to provide better services with another organization.
The ask is for capital so they can continue the services that they provide. It's not creating a Meals on Wheels program. That already exists there. They have significant capital needs on the building. I think the letter that you all received from them was around, they've identified 1.2 or so million dollars. Well, totally, yes. They gave us just over 3 million, I think. And they're looking for capital improvements to keep that thing viable. The facility, and part of that facility is used to provide Meals on Wheels. So it's not creating a new Meals on Wheels program.
I'd like to add to that. Anybody that has been, there's historic significance with the Vernon Center that goes back decades. It ties into the Quindale ruin. It ties into the first HBCU college that has historic nature. I just like to say that if you go into that building, the services they provide to seniors and other programs are deplorable. And they've been operating in those deplorable conditions for years. They didn't get any ARPA funds from the last round. I don't know why. The unified government really hasn't done any type of investment that I know of, and I could be wrong as far as that facility. They are a partner with the unified government is providing those services. But when you look at what we're asking our seniors to go into, there are safety concerns. To have the elderly going here to get the kind of services that are vital to their quality of life. And so I can vouch for the Vernon Center. I've been in there several times. And I would just like to say that it's long overdue that this body look at investing in the Vernon Center to make sure that they have a safe, clean, amicable, updated, quality facility to provide services that community has come to expect. And I always say that they deserve, because that's one of those areas that's been disenfranchised and disinvested for far too long. And I think this would be a good first step in showing this community that they are valued, and that should be one of our priorities.
Thank you, Mayor. I won't disagree with you. It has historical significance. I'm just wondering if $500,000 is going to meet the need. Is it enough, as you stated? I'm just curious if I'm just trying to, if Vernon Center is that important, we have Heathwood Spray Park that needs a complete redo. Do you want to spend the whole 500,000 for a redo, and or do you want to move more money into the Vernon Center? I mean, these are decisions we need to make collectively. We can't just throw a little bit of money at everything and expect it to be crystal clear and new. We have to pick priorities here. And I'm hoping, and I'm not trying to be argumentative or confrontational. It's just frustrating when we came up with $8.8 million and we're spending almost 10 with an additional request over the $1.5 million that we talked about earlier. So the public safety I'm good with. I would still say that if we're going to fund the UTV for downtown patrol, I am to understand that the air conditioning at the shooting range needs to be addressed. I think that police UTV, that we ask the SMID and the downtown shareholders to utilize some of their revenue and pay for that UTV to help patrol our downtown. And I think that's a responsible and respectful thing to do, to have partners here. I don't have any other questions, and I apologize for my demeanor. I know we have a tremendous amount of need. That's why we had to take the decisions we've made in budgeting, but we no sooner get money and it's out the door before we even know it. Now, the money that's eligible for ARPA, I understand. These other funds, if there was a way to put them into ARPA and run some money around, that would be fine. But I would just soon put the $1 million into the ending balance and lock it down in reserves so that we have that to help our end game with additional things that may come forward. But I would hope that in my request to get a bench, I think it's my third or fourth year to request that bench, and a little disappointed that we've got all these other parks that have been addressed and they've gotten everything else that's been requested, but we haven't gotten an all-inclusive bench for an all-inclusive park for some of those and really in need in our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Before we go to Commissioner Bynum, Parks Director, to get the benches that the Commissioner is talking about, what's the estimated cost projected for that?
I am not sure. We have not installed any of those in our system. We don't have an inclusive bench. I will look into it and get that information and
You would have to think,
get it executed.
Harrison, just what are we looking at just as a roundabout?
1,500.
1,500 a bench?
Well, a regular bench that's not inclusive runs about 1,000, and that's not with the concrete pad or the footing. So I would love a little bit more time to look into it. 1,500, 2,000 maybe.
Okay, that's a good rough estimate. Now, I say that because, and you know, I got the utmost respect for you, Commissioner Burrows. I do, I always have. I don't believe from what I've gotten that there has been a request to go over the $1 million other than it's identifying needs that would go over that. I would like to point out in CFO for clarity, these are funds that have to be spent that aren't unified government funds, that were on a timeline, that were allocated, I believe, towards other organizations, help me out, that have been recaptured. I'm just a little clarity on that, but we are on a timeline And these are already grant funds that can be applied to provide these needs. For example, Vernon Center and they brought us a proposal, but the proposal was different phases and they prioritized. If we can get this much money for this phase, we can work on a partnership, a public partnership. We'll raise the money, but this is our immediate need. We need $500,000, actually a little more today. But we would like to have about 3 million. Well, obviously we don't have 3 million to give them, but if 500,000 will improve the quality of life and the conditions for those residents, I call it an investment and a seed in at least to get something going that will provide something that's better than what's already there. The same with Heathwood Park, Boston Daniels Park, I believe it's a seed. We know that it's over $1 million. What we're doing is we're seeding investments into areas, in these public private partnerships really have to weigh in. The public is going to have to shore up the rest of these funds. And so I'm all for that. The police department, we do know that the range does need an AC unit replaced. Our officers deserve to have a training environment that they can train effectively and be efficient in, as part of making sure that they have the tools and resources to make good decisions when they get out in the field to protect us. I have nothing against what the commissioner outlined with downtown shareholders is if the commission does choose to, we can go back to them and say, we would like for them out of the SHMID, because that is tax dollars that we're not getting, to reimburse unified government for that purchase. I believe that we have 485 there, CFO, that you talked about. If we didn't want to tap into the general fund of $1 million, that could be used. I don't think that the commissioners asked for about $5,000 worth of benches is too much to ask. To move that, as you keep track of what the actual asks are, I'm not sure what the priority you mentioned on Parkwood Park, a pool rather, which I support as well. What is the cost of that immediate need that, okay, if we don't get this fixed today, the pool won't be open this coming summer? And is that something that is a priority based on what Commissioner Townsend had mentioned? Because then we also have the remainder of the grant, and we also have $1 million there if this body so chooses to make that investment as well. So there are monies to be moved around. Another thing is the Willagill homeless. We owe it to Willagill, in my opinion, and we owe it to the community college to make sure that we created a learning environment for our young people and of all ages, to make sure that we don't have a mix of different services, because you got an education service mixed with a population. We know there's been some challenges over the years. I've dealt with it when I was on the police department, of trying to serve that population. That population of education and the population of indigents in my opinion, doesn't mix. And I've already been told by some residents that if we don't fix that, they would be challenged to send or recommend sending people to the downtown campus to get an education. And that's not what we want when we talk about investing and making sure our educational environment is sustainable as we try and rebuild our downtown in a way that resurgent and really exudes what this mayor can go out and say, come see what Kansas City, Kansas has to offer. So that's grant money that is available, that is there, that I know our administrator has basically identified as a rough estimate of what it would cost to purchase as well as demo the property for a build out. So I wanted this body to just kind of think about that. And CFO, if you can just come behind me and really talk about these funds and why we're on such a tight timeline of why this is an additional spending. This is money that was all allocated to be spent.
That's right. So the funding that has been identified is after a reconciliation process based on the original plan. And the great majority of these dollars come from that immediate need category in public health. And those initiatives were done but we received an additional allocation that we did not know about, FEMA, that then funded funded a lot of those initiatives. So it was they were able to perform what they had said they were going to do, but they got additional funding. When I came, we were in a process of, I took a look, and all of the ARPA recipients, if you've watched the news or read local papers, any municipality or local government that received ARPA funds are going through the same dialogue, because you have your initial plan and then you have the actual cost, and then sometimes the plans change. And so it was a whole process of reconciliation. And I'll just be honest and say it wasn't easy. It was not an easily tracked process from the way our books were, okay? And the way that we had been managing those dollars. So it took a little time. And so when we came back to you in May, end of May, was to say, look, we know we're going to have some dollars. We believe they're going to be substantial. But we need to do a little bit more due diligence to know how many dollars. And an area in particular we weren't sure about was subrecipients, but we feel much better and more confident about that, of that $12 million. So the rest of this is really in the spreadsheet. I can show you. It's at the top of this. Okay, so up here, you can see, so we had some capital projects that that came in under estimate. So we had 4 approved HVAC projects at community centers that just came in less expensive than our original estimate. And so that was good, but that means that we had some savings. That's at 268. The parks project we've talked about, but one of them, we've talked about the pool, the Parkwood pool, and the 150, and just the thought process that Parks was going through, yet to be decided on that 150 or more dollars. The other thing was that there were funds set aside for Quindaro and Clam Park, and Quindaro was completed, but Clam Park got funding from CDBG. So kind of like the health department got FEMA dollars, another revenue source became available, and they were able to get that done. So that freed those dollars up. And that's about 273,000. Grant match we've talked about. We just laid that out there just to full disclosure. You know, here's how much you all had set aside for grant match, 3.5 million. We've used $1.3 million, so we could use the rest of it for other high priority needs. And that's at 2.189. The rest of that has to do with the immediate needs, public health. And I've already explained, don't get concerned about the city county side of it. But you are absolutely right in saying these are not UG funds. These are federal funds that we have already been given. We have the money. And if we do not use them, then we would return them to the federal government, and they would likely reallocate those dollars to other local governments for their ask. So it's not it's not an end all be all for our budget issues we have on the operating side, for sure. But it did allow us with this short time frame, and I am equally a bit, frustrated, I guess, that we have such a short time frame. But it is what it is, and that's as soon as the information I could get it available to you, you got it. And I don't make the rules. The feds have made the rules, and we have to encumber them by December of 24. So all we're trying to say is, okay, we know about some of these immediate public health issues. We know in the budget, we weren't able to afford capital requests by and large because of just our overall constraints. Capital projects are a good candidate of how to use these dollars because we can get them under contract by the end of the year, and it's one time. It's not funding our operations, which are ongoing cost. So it doesn't just fix a problem today to delay it and then have the problem re-emerge again tomorrow. So an option would be to return funding. That is an option. Or an option is to look at what the needs are and to prioritize them. I guess what I've heard so far, just to maybe try to capture, I've heard, I'm not going to say consensus, but I've heard a strong appeal and no objections to some benches, at least $5,000 worth of benches that are ADA accessible for 5,000. I've heard neighborhood grants, and there has been a number of people that have talked about that for 39. Okay, Mayor.
If you would, because at some point, we're going to work to get to a consensus on this tonight. I mean, that's a commitment that I've made to our administrator and our staff, that this commission is going to have to come to a consensus on these federal dollars that have to be spent, and where we're going to spend them. And so, if you would, based on what I've heard as well, can you add the 2 or 3 benches to the park, at Wyandotte County Park for the commissioner at his request, but also the eastern portion of the commissioner's district is Rosedale Park. Add those benches as there. Well, that is a heavily used park as well on the eastern portion of the commissioner's district. And then we talked about, I believe that several commissioners talked about replacement funds for our neighborhood group. You mentioned that you could take that out, add that as well. Where I'm going with this is I'm trying to get a consensus, because I'm going to have this commission vote, and we're going to keep voting until we can get an approval tonight before we leave. So that's the goal of this, Mayor, is to get us something approved before we leave here tonight. And I wasn't really clear on Commissioner Townsend's wall at the Boston Daniels Park. I'm kind of confused. Was that part of the bid? Is it not part of the bid? And then if it's not part of the bid, what would that cost be? And do we need to examine that as well? Because I totally support Boston Daniels Park. I was there when I was a deputy chief on the police department. I worked hand in hand with the organization and Ms. Daniels to try and move this conversation forward. It is a strong public-private partnership, and it is, again, long overdue, along with many needs. But we're looking at distressed, identified census tracts where the investment is needed most. And so we have to remember that as well. I mean, these are areas that have been disinvested, disenfranchised for far too long. And so do we have enough money to go around and handle everything? No, but I do believe we are investing and seeding a foundation for improvements as time goes on. So I'm gonna shut up and go to Commissioner Bynum, and I know Commissioner Townsend, and then Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. I agree with Commissioner Burrows' desire to have a bench at the inclusive play park. When we first cut the ribbon on that park, I immediately identified there was no place to sit down. I did ask Jack Webb for bids on that bench before he retired, because we had thought perhaps my Kiwanis Club would fundraise and put that bench in that park. And I don't remember the answer, but I think it was more than $2,000. And I can probably go back to an email and find it. And that was multiple years ago, but I am 100% in favor of that. The other thing is that we got an AARP grant for a bench specifically. And one of the suggestions I made as part of our work with Communities for All Ages was that inclusive play area as a location for that bench. And I don't know if that location's been selected or not. Do you?
First of all, I do want to apologize. That was never intentional to not execute that project. So I apologize if it seems that way. I am aware of the AARP grant. Alyssa Marcy has included us in trying to help execute that. That has not been relayed to me, but it is also something that I was thinking of as we were sitting here having this discussion.
So it's possible that we could place the AARP grant bench at that park.
Yeah, I mean, I'm look into it, but I would think so from what I know.
I mean, really, there's a million places in the county that could use a bench. So that was just one suggestion I had made with that grant. Just a couple of comments here. I'm going to circle back to Parkwood. Because within the report that we were given, and I emailed the report to both Clerk Sparks and CFO Canuven in case you wanted to pull it up because the budget analysis is in there. However, just in general, the opinion of the cost to perform immediate and basic improvements and extend the life of the facility by another 20 to 25 years is approximately 1 million to 1.4 million. These improvements include, but are not limited to, renovation to address ADA noncompliance, repair water loss from pipes, replace the filter and pump, recoat the pool basins, recoat diving boards, and miscellaneous repairs. So the 1 to 1.4 million would do a lot. So anyway, and the budget part of that they laid out for us in the report was too small to see on my phone. So I couldn't enlarge it enough to see the numbers. I sent it to you if there's a desire to look at it. If there's not, I'm good. I'm just saying that pool, we have the report. We know what it needs. It's an opportunity. And then my last comment, Mayor, and thank you, is we had a variety of people stand and ask us to go revenue neutral, and we listened to that and we did that. And we had a variety of people, albeit in fewer numbers, stand on budget hearing night and ask us to please not cut those neighborhood funds. I don't think those are necessarily the same two populations of people. There might be a few people in both groups, but this is a way to win on both of those fronts. This is a way to have revenue neutral, which we do, and still fulfill the request of the neighborhood groups who are using those funds. And it's a way to provide those small grants for that one budget year of 2025. So that's why I continue to support that, because it gives both sides what they asked for. Mayor, thank you.
And I can't disagree. And to address, I got to look at things from the entire county. And really just being community driven, which a lot of you heard me say that I am. I do, and it's no secret, I've supported revenue neutral. We're there, but then also, looking at the requests from those neighborhood groups, I'm not opposed, but I think you got that grant match there that can handle that request. And then for those revenue neutral folks, we've got $1 million sitting to shore up our general fund that can help with the revenue neutral challenges that we face with that as well. So I just ask that this body just take a strategic and holistic look as you try and get to an informed decision. I believe it's Commissioner Townsend, and then we had Commissioner Hill, and then after Commissioner Hill, Commissioner Lopez, in that order.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me circle back to some things that you mentioned in support. I appreciate your support for the Vernon School. I was one of maybe about 3 commissioners left here that was on the original ARPA distribution. And the Vernon School did submit what turned out to be an incomplete application, unfortunately. So since then, tried to support them when it was possible with casino grant a little bit, but as you and I know, their needs far exceed that. So your numbers were correct. I think there was like a $1.5 to $3 million asked for their building fund. So they are, Commissioner Burrows, trying to raise outside of the ask for the unified government to do some much needed restoration on that building. Some programs, but it was more the infrastructure. And they're serving meals there Monday through Friday for the seniors, but it was really about building and rebuilding in that capital program. So this would be good seed money for them toward that. So I support them. Again, with the Parkwood pool, I would love to see the 1.4 million. I wasn't asking for more. I'm just giving this body a heads up on what they have yet to see from the upcoming presentation. That's the filter system alone. The real issue is what we need to do to keep it going versus really an aquatic center. Is that the right place to keep it? How do we expand it? So that's a bigger discussion. And if we were going to use all of that, then some of the other alternatives we're talking about here would not be viable. So that's why I did not bring it up. The other issue would be, can we really do what we need to do in terms of contracting by the end of the year? We've talked about this repeatedly tonight, that we're against a time frame. So I don't know that that was actually viable or possible. Again, that's why I didn't bring it up, but it is coming. So with regard to the Boston Daniels East Wall, I'm not sure still if that's in or out. But what I would like to see done is have some of that $1 million or the grant match money, whatever it would take, to make sure that that is accomplished.
This is Wendy with legal. The only thing I will clarify, and this is probably why Angel's a little bit hesitant, because it is an active RFP. It could be that it is in one of the bids that may get chosen, but because it's active RFP, we can't talk about what's in any of the bids. Yeah.
I appreciate
Yeah.
that. I sense that, okay? But whether it is or it's not, since it's not clear right now and we don't know what will be accepted, I'm just calling money for that project to be completed, because without it, it doesn't matter what else we put there, you know? So I sense that. Thank you. Something else. With regard to, where was that? Oh, the police UTV downtown. Commissioner Burrows, is that the expense you were suggesting we go to the SMID for? Or ask to be reimbursed? Yeah, I don't see a problem with that. The only thing that I would say is, as long as we have something in the general fund or something to fall back on, I just want to see them get it. I thought that was a good idea and an alternative, but I'd want to see it funded somehow. So again, that's another little section that I guess grant match or county fund, but I can appreciate going to another source for that. And this may have been discussed already, but I just don't recall. The Health Department car seat program, is that going to get us X amount of car seats? Is this going to be an ongoing program? If you can give me some more information about that.
Yeah, I'll have Terry speak a little bit about that. She's the Deputy Health Director for us.
Hi, I'm Terry Garrison. I'm the Deputy Director at the Public Health Department. And for the car seat program, it is the Kansas State Highway Patrol car seat program. And so it will get us some car seats. It's also for maternal and child health. We also have our fetal infant mortality review, and it will get some pack and plays. So some of the babies will actually also have safe sleep environments, because a number of our youngest, most vulnerable children don't have their own sleeping environment. They sleep in the parent's bed and then end up suffocating with rollovers and things like that.
Oh, so how many car seats would this amount of money procure for us approximately?
Yeah, approximately 250. If it all was car seats, but even a pack and play, it's roughly $200 per for a car seat, or a pack and play is about $200 per. So whichever the need was, it would get you helping 250 families with infants.
And what would be the manner in which these would be distributed? Do they have to qualify for something in particular? They just come to the health department and request them, or?
We do education. So there's just a short education that we give them on utilizing a car seat appropriately, making sure that they know how to measure the child and the weight of the child, and changing the straps on the car seats, how to buckle the car seats appropriately into the cars, whether they're forward facing or backward facing, depending on the age and the size of the child. And then also with the pack and plays, the education on safe sleep environment, nothing else in the bed, you know, only the child, no stuffed animals or blankets that they can get covered up over them and things like that.
Okay, so there's a program that these parents would have to qualify for or a minimum eligibility?
No income eligibility to it, no. They just go through a short training.
So they just can come to the health department and make the request and then they would go through the training?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that information. That is critical. I remember the SIDS epidemic way back and, you know, to think that all that had to be done really was to have kids, the babies placed on their backs. So they do need safe sleeping environment. Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Mayor, one other suggestion. Oh. Mayor, to move it along, I don't know if it would be helpful to reach consensus and make sure we're out to go down
Well,
each item, or I don't know.
almost there. I
Okay.
believe we had a couple more commissioners. I think Commissioner Hill and then Commissioner Lopez.
I was pretty much going to ask the same thing, like, we just need a motion to accept this part and then another motion to accept the additional issues?
I'll definitely, I'll explain it as soon as
Okay.
questions. Commissioner Lopez? Ma'am, I'm sorry, there's no public comment tonight. I'm sorry, Mother. No. You can get with me after the meeting and I'll be able to talk. There was no scheduled public comment tonight. Yes, yeah, there was no public comment.
Yeah, I just, for Angel, a quick question. The Heathwood Park, 500,000, is that a bid that you guys received from the contractor,
It's a budget number, yes.
budget number? So what I'm getting at is, we own BPU. So why don't we get with our engineers, BPU's engineers, have BPU with their hose, go dig it up, use our engineers to draw up, their engineers to draw up dimensions for a concrete manhole box, have American Concrete build it, use BPU pipe and gauges, and buy what we need from Wind Tracks, and then put it in there. Just save a buttload of money than using a contractor. Just do it all ourselves. We've got the equipment, we've got the know-how, we have the manpower, we have the material. If we don't have the material, we can get the material through BPU. And then just like Boston Daniels Park here, that's where she's talking about the wall falling in and whatnot. We have the know-how. There's guys that work here in the maintenance facility here that can build that. It's not hard. These guys have been in building trades for a long time. We have the manpower. We have to put out an RFP. We have our own people that can build it. We can buy the material instead of putting out RFPs and hiring. We can just say, hey, we need this built. What I'm trying to say is all of our departments, including BPU, we all have the manpower. We all have the know-how. We all have the trades. We just come together and we just do it. Is that possible? Or do we have to put out an RFP? Can we just use our own people, our own employees to do this? Is that possible?
So I will say we have been working very diligently with BPU and with the trained staff. Unfortunately, it's really not something that we can take on in-house. For example, we're just limited resources as well, and some of that we just don't have the skill set to do in-house. I do understand the feedback on that one, but unfortunately for something like this, we don't have the expertise. But we are working with Public Works, with their engineering department, with BPU. We've had several people at the table helping us work through this. But unfortunately, we just don't have the resources or the skill set to be able to do this full project in-house.
Have you reached out to John Kelly about talking to his guys? I know 3 of them that could very well do a lot of this work. And there's a lot of guys in the water department that can probably for the Heathwood Spray Park. It's just, I mean, is that something that is on the table that could just reach out to all the resources that we have, especially, like I said, there's 3 guys I know that are maintenance department, right, that work in this building that can very well build that wall. And then the American Equipment in my district, or it's right down the road. It's Inland and Holiday, right on the corner. That's what they do, is they build manholes, they build whatever we need. Just give them the right dimensions and they can do it. And I'm sure our engineers can draw it up, than having given some contractor all the money when we can do it ourselves. That's what I'm saying, is there's a lot more trade skilled workers here. That was just, it's something, we could save a ton of money doing that too. And I'm not saying that these are fly by night guys. These are actual good builders, that's built homes and built walls and things like that. So it was just, yeah, I mean, it's just, there's more resources there. It was
Commissioner,
just,
if I can jump in for a quick second. If we were to tackle doing something like this in-house, the issue would be getting the actual project done by December of 24. So there's a time question, as well as, so we don't have a lot of staff in any department sitting around without other responsibilities. So if the building people were assigned over to do the wall, for example, what are they not going to get done would need to be part of the equation. Same with water, same with BPU, because they have an abundance of work, as I'm sure you know.
right.
But I like that you're bringing up a, creative solution. I know that our buildings and logistics staff do help the park department with a lot of maintenance responsibilities. So it's not that they're not using the on-staff resources, but for some of these bigger projects that have multiple components to it, because this would be concrete, it'd be plumbing, it would be connecting into, the sewer line, it would be the, play structures that go with a spray park. So it's like it's a lot of different.
Right. No, I totally understand that. And that's what a lot of these BP water guys do, is exactly what they do, is right there every day. That's what I'm saying, is you utilize our own people, our own BPU. Say, hey, you're not gonna be working on this pipe today. What you're gonna be doing is we're gonna be building this. And we need it done by this day. I'm sure there's bosses that every day say, all right, we got to get this job done today. And so, or there's a high line, or there's distribution or water line, whatever. Hey, we got to have this job done this week, is what I'm saying, is we can utilize it. We have a lot of skilled workers that just put it right there. Hey, I'm your boss, and then we got to have this done by this month. Bottom line. Oh, okay. Thank you.
I guess I just would like to add, I wish it was that simple. Because no, we have a short, we don't have a lot of staff. Yes, we do have qualified staff, but the needs that they need to work within their whole responsibility throughout the county, throughout the city. We can't just say this project is priority to other needs facing our citizens. Even when you look at the work of building and logistics and they work on an HVAC, they contract that out because they don't have this number of staff members to pay attention to the work that needs to be done, because their demand is spread out through a wider area. And those needs are important too. And so it's easier and quicker to bid it out and get it done. The second thing is, when you're dealing with public structures like you're talking about, there is a certain amount of Particularly when you're using federal funds, there are federal rules that you have to follow when it comes to construction. Our folks may not be necessarily trained on what those things are because they don't do it every day. And therefore, to protect the liability to our taxpayers, it's better to shift that liability to a third party that has that training and the exposure. And so it's transferred to them to do it right. But because of the number of workers that these public agencies have, us, BPU, they're not in the building business. And therefore, to get it done right and quicker and to legal standards, that's why we do RFPs and all that.
Yeah, so, but I mean, Angel, I just want to say you're doing an amazing job as as a director. I didn't want to, hopefully I didn't come off like, but, and then on the police UTV downtown deal, why don't we have the library kick out the money too? They've got all that money wrapped up doing nothing, so why don't they kick out the money towards that?
The library is actually part of the,
Is it part of the SMID?
no, the library is part of the school district, USD 500.
Well, it's part of their security as well, right?
We don't manage or have any control over, their individual board would control that.
Right, but that's still tax-paying money.
But we can't tell another taxing entity how to levy their taxes. That's why the commissioner recommended what we can do is the SMID, and pay it out of what we can control because it's ours.
Well, can we at least request like we can pretty please with the cherry on top?
Oh, yeah, you can always add.
Sounds good.
I agree. But, CFO? Now, Commissioner, stop me at any time if I'm wrong. But what I've picked up on from my notes is that, based on Commissioner Bynum's estimates, we're looking at 2 chairs, for Wyandotte County Park at about 5,000 apiece, I take it. And then, or if you come for one, and then another chair for Rosedale Park, so that's about $10,000. And then I know that Commissioner Bynum and Townsend and several other commissioners were looking, I believe Hill as well, we're looking at the replacement for the groups, or however much that is, the 30, whatever. And I believe that you were looking at taking all that out of the grant match. We haven't even dug into the county general fund balance. It's just going in there. So we're just looking at the grant match. I haven't heard anything else as far as anything, well, we've got to have this or move this money here out of what's already there. So if we just take that, what does that take our grant match down to?
Can I make a recommendation instead of getting down to 5,000 here, 15,000 here, is let's combine the million and the 485 and throw that and have it be available for further discussions when we get better numbers on some of these requests. So we can move along. I mean, we're 2 hours, 3 hours going on this. And I just think that what's most important and is, I'm going to go a little longer here, is when I got trained in doing CARES money and ARPA money, the federal government said, yes, this is to help meet the needs of your community, help replace revenue that your government loses because of COVID's impact on your revenue streams, like sale tax revenue goes down, you're going to get it back through this money. And you go through a calculation on all this. But also what the feds explicitly said for both of these programs, it was a jobs bill. And how it was a jobs bill is public employees did not lose their job during the pandemic. And you created capital projects that you contracted out so the private sector wouldn't lose jobs due to the pandemic. So in essence, this is a combination jobs bill, replace public dollars that is lost because of the impact on this thing. We really went through, it's my understanding, the commissioners that served on that COVID task force on how you're going to distribute these funds. You allocated things that we needed within this government to provide services and capital projects. But we also gave a chunk, about $18 million, to our social service friends in our community to provide services to help their populations survive the COVID. And we did that, and they did that remarkably well. Reason why we're talking today about $8 million, we got a $5 to $6 million FEMA grant. And that supplanted identified ARPA money to the health department. So in essence, we should only be talking about $1.5 to $2 million tonight, but we don't. So we have this dilemma, is that we either give this back to the federal government come at the end of the year, or do we use it to meet certain needs that have been identified by you, commissioners, and by our staff. And I wish we had this information in May. We didn't have this information in May. It came 4 days after we passed this budget, revenue neutral budget. Timing's terrible. I've had one commissioner say, you purposely cut out one of the things I wanted funded. I did not do that. But we had to have a balanced budget. So 4 days later, we have $8.8 million that we have to reprogram to the need. And by this collective discussion, some of this stuff was in the initial working budget pre-revenue neutral. And so we have old buildings that need to be attended to. Yes, Parkwood Pool needs to be attended to. It's expensive. If you look at the ARPA projects that we put there, those are there because they qualify using the ARPA rules. And if we stay there, we just have to march it through the federal process that gets it approved by December 31st this year. That's all we got to do. The challenging part is we got 3.65 of discretionary spending. And I mean, in essence, if we didn't have demands from the community and from our government, I would say just take 3.6 million, pad our reserve account. And that would be the easiest way to do that. But we've made promises with Boston Daniels Park that we should fulfill. We have a spray park that could help the kids in a neighborhood, because it's the fact. We have a highly used gym that has a HVAC system that's about ready to go. The bus replacements, I look at it as meeting a need because we have an aging fleet, but in 2 years, we're going to be using those buses during the time that we're a host community for World Cup. So it's a legacy help. Animal control is what it is. We have lots of animals. We have to deal with the animals that we recover. Hopefully through adoption, they'll be released. But as long as they're under our care, we got to care for them. The jail, we talked about how challenging it is to deal with the sheriff's budget because it's such a variable budget. depends on jail population, detention population, all that stuff. We have to take care of it. Some months it's high, some months it's low. But he would love to be able to predict what it is. But he did work with us. He did promise a contribution to the revenue neutral with the idea that if there are opportunities to help monitor it through the year and make sure he has the resources to do his job for 12 months, we're doing that. That's where this $200,000 comes in. He has to feed prisoners and detainees. So we're kind of, and like some of you have intimated, there's far more needs in this community, but I wish we had time. But I have 4 months to be able to obligate this money to spend it, because I know community that got COVID money wants to give it back to the feds. Actually, the feds don't want it back either. I hate to say that, they want you to spend it. And therefore, that's what we're here today. I recommend you combine the million and the 485, and we deal with that later, but we put it in the reserve. I mean, we can do that on December 30th if we had to. Well, I don't do motions, but this is just, I gave you a recommendation last week. But on this TB thing, I wish we didn't have it in our community. It's in our community. We have to respond, and it's complicated. Yet, because it's complicated, it costs money. And therefore, we are proposing or probably an 8-month program, about just over $1 million. And we'll make sure it gets to, but we also have the partnerships with the CDC and Kansas Environmental Health to help us out. But they also say, you're the local health department. You are the boots on the ground. You have to show skin in the game. That's our skin in the game. But that's responding to our citizens. So we have that obligation. So and the Willa Gill thing, there was a promise made last year with partnerships with community college that we'd find a new home for it. Again, that's expensive, but we're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, creating a good education center in our core. Hopefully, it will serve as a springboard for redeveloping our downtown to a different level that we see it today. But we still have an obligation to provide good care to those who find themselves in a homeless, houseless situation. And so this is the best I think we can do, and gives us the flexibility of $1.485 million to deal with at a later day.
If I could just ask for one clarification. With the items that there seems to be consensus on, monies that are put into the fund balance would require a future action. So if there is consensus to restore the neighborhood grants and to do the benches in Wyandotte and Rosedale, I would just suggest, if there's consensus for that you go ahead and make that decision tonight, and then you won't have to make another decision later. And then
Let me take that from you. What was that amount? I agree with our administrator. Thank you, administrator, for your recommendation, but I agree with you as well. We need to get this resolved. So with what's on the table, so what was that amount? What would that take us down to on the grant match?
be 436, 177.
Okay, so just in line with the recommendation of our administrator, we would add the 436 to the $1 million to go in the general fund to have further discussions about any other projects. So I'm going to make the motion so we can move on. We've been here for several hours now. I make a motion to move 436. Is that correct, CFO?
436, 177.
436,177 to the county general fund to add to the million, and to accept the proposed reallocations for eligibility as has been recommended by staff.
Mayor, just a question, procedurally, we're in a special session. I don't think we can take a vote, can we? I agree with everything you said, but can we
This is
take? a
when you
vote?
agreeing with legal. Yes, you can. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yes,
Second,
yes. Okay.
second.
Mayor,
There's a question.
before we second and finalize your motion, if you want to, because you said 1,436,177 plus what's recommended, you would want to say plus the $10,000 for the benches
Yes.
and the 39,000.
Yes,
for it.
yes, that would
That
include,
would be really the motion.
yes, that's the motion.
Okay.
Okay,
Second.
okay. One more question.
Okay, so on these park benches, just real fast, because I was just kind of looking at some, and they were, I mean, they were going for 600 to 1,000 a piece, but I mean, if there's money left over from the 10K, it'll go back. Or can we push that to whatever else Angel could use for parks?
I'll let the CFO answer. CFO, the question from the commissioner was, if the benches, excuse me, I apologize. If the benches, I apologize. I don't cuss. I'm a Christian. Forgive me. If the benches come under bid, where does that money go? Any of the bids that we would put out for proposals?
Right. So we could do one of two things. And like I had mentioned before, we would put options in the bid so that we could buy as much as we can with what's allocated. So option one would be you authorize $10,000 to buy as many benches as we can based on the bids. Or option two is that you authorize 4 benches, I think is what I've heard, 2 in one park, 2 in another, and the remaining then goes to the fund balance. So whichever way you would want to do it. But with other projects that we're bidding, we feel pretty confident on our estimates, which is part of why we picked these particular things. But if we came across a situation, we will make sure we have options in those bids so that we're able to spend the money for the purpose, okay, without putting money left over back to the feds. I
Oh,
hope that
just a
answers.
quick question. So like if we gave her, we give Angel 10K and she ends up spending 4,500, could, or even $5,000, could we just say, hey, Angel, here's an extra 5,000, you can allocate whatever else you need towards parks?
We can do that as long as it's then designated and spent or contracted by December 24. And since what we're talking about would be revenue replacement, we have more flexibility. It wouldn't have to be like in a certain location or a certain type of project.
All right, so Angel, you're gonna need to spend that money pretty fast.
There's another question from Commissioner Burrows.
Thank you, Mayor. I do respect and appreciate the fact that you want to set the money aside. I'm more supportive of the administrator's position to put the 1.485. I think it's only fair and equitable, and prudent thing to do is get bids on those benches. I'd hate to set the money aside and there's no organization that even provides them. I don't know this, and I'm not willing to say, give me 10 grand, give me 15 grand. I want to be specific. I can't sit here and preach about fiscal responsibility and then throw a dart at a dartboard and say, this is what I want, and I think that'll cover it. We've had a number of years in which to do that. I'd like to go back to the to the administrator's position of putting 1.485, and then those other issues that come forward, we vote on them and debate them as they come up. We've had plenty of discussion on this. There's things in here I don't like, but if it's beneficial to this community and ARPA funds helps us meet that, then I'm willing to swallow hard and do this. But I just want to send the message that I'm not out here trying to make a money grab, and I'm not accusing anybody else of it. I'm just stating that we found some money, and if we're going to spend it, let's spend it prudently so that we don't have to come back here and beg, borrow, and steal from other departments to get it done. And so, Mayor, I might make a substitute motion, if I may, to do what the administrator requested, put the 1.485177 in the general fund, or however you want to do it. General fund, I have to say that, then you can move it to reserves if you want. then that we can have that discussion later. I'd like, you know what? I'm going to make it to reserves. I'll make it to reserves. And then I'd make a motion, we accept the budget as presented by the administrator, the 1.485177 going into reserves, and approve the rest of the budget.
I don't have a problem with that. Just one question, and I have no problem with your park benches, and I fully understand that. You just want to get definitive amounts.
Mhm.
The one question is, I know several commissioners did have an ask for the 36,000, and is that the amount? If you put that in as proposed by Commissioner Burrows, with that time limit, would that still be something that this commission can move forward as far as that request?
So if you were to just put the full amount into the general fund balance, then you would have to take a future action, okay, to approve those dollars for the neighborhood grants. I will say, I feel like I need to do a little bit more deeper dive on deferring decisions past December 24, kind of knowingly that we're sitting the money there and then planning to do something after December of 24, which is why we specifically said this was in essence, almost a contingency for the jail and the dispatch. So I would need to do a little bit more, but if there is a consensus to move forward with the neighborhood grants, I think it would be better to do that now. It's cleaner than to defer that to later, just honestly, so that we can get that process going.
You deal with that.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. I just had a question about the motion. The amount, I go either way with, that's not the problem. The question I have is why specifically designate this into reserves? Because I don't want it lost as opposed to this going into the general fund balance.
You just answered the question. It goes into reserves.
And the-
And then if we feel it's important enough to dip into the reserves to get it, we work collectively to do that. I hesitate to even do that because it ties the administrator's hands. If we left it in the general fund, then we can come up and have this discussion about the 39,000, the 36,000 for the police. We can have those discussions because we have it in the general fund.
In theory, Commissioner, if there's any extra unspent obligated money in the general fund, it's automatically in the reserve. So it's going into the reserve anyway. So to get it out of the reserve, it takes a public vote.
Which we're going
It's
to do.
just
Okay.
semantics, ma'am. It's just semantics.
Okay. Devil's in the details. So we know. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
So my motion,
Hold on, I got you. I'm going to withdraw my motion.
Yeah.
And-
I withdraw my second.
Okay, and so the motion as presented by, I'll let Commissioner Burrows.
my motion is to accept what's been presented, the allocations, with combining the 1.485177 goes into general fund. I would like to put the proviso on that the 36,000 for the UTV that we follow up with the downtown shareholders to see if we can't get some buy-in on that. But that's my motion. Second.
Question. What about the 1 million?
That's the
Is
one
it-
point, that's counting the 1.485177 includes the million.
Okay, so the amount going into what fund is what, 1.4? I'm just trying to make sure.
1.485177.
Okay, and the
What we're
most,
voting on is just what we see here on the sheet, with the caveat that the police UTV downtown, we will approach the downtown shareholders, see if they will reimburse us for that. We'll go ahead and pay for it, but
Mhm.
we'll ask if they'll reimburse it or partner with us.
But
And
it's-
then the 1.485177, those very two bottom numbers,
right?
go back into the general fund. Then we can discuss how we want to spend them later on at another meeting.
All right, so you're saying it's going to general fund. Thank you for the clarity.
Okay, now there's a motion and a second, but Commissioner Bynum has. a
Thank you
question.
very much, Mayor. In order for me to support that, my request to you is that the neighborhood grant discussion for 39,000 of that money comes to my Administration and Human Services Committee at our next available meeting.
I can honor that. This is a point of clarity. Administrator Clerk, can you make sure that that request is carried out?
We'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Appreciate this discussion. I'm just going to say, after you make a decision, we're going to act on this. Staff. And so let you know that when we say that we're sensitive to time, we got to get moving. And there are some very important items on here that we got to get activated as quickly as tomorrow. We have a lot of people to talk to. We got some bids that got to get organized. The clock is going to be ticking. So appreciate this discussion, but I'll let you know, we're going to be committed to get moving.
Okay. All right. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk roll call.
Roll call, Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows, Townsend,
Aye.
Burns,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Lopez,
Aye.
motion carries.
All right. Well, thank you all. I know it's been a spirited discussion. Thank you, staff. Thank you, commission. And congratulations to those individual agencies that got the award. This concludes our special meeting for tonight. There is no further items to discuss. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move.
Second.
Motion and a second, clerk roll call.
Roll call, Bynum,
Aye.
Burrows, Townsend,
Aye.
Burns,
Aye.
Hill,
Aye.
Lopez,
Aye.
motion carries.
Thank you all. Have a great evening.
My feet fell asleep.
Oh, shit.
Looney Tunes.